Alright, what is going on, everyone? We are ready to start off the UBL stream. Before we do that though, for everyone in the chat and for the coach who are around as well, in the chat you can use !UBL, that will link you to all the relevant information of the UBL, so both the league and also for the coaches that will be competing this season. The full lineup has already dropped on Twitter. We already posted it there, but of course you guys will see the team soon. You can check out all the channels that will be participating this season. 14 teams in total this time, and we should all be good to go if I can get this thing to move. And also to turn my webcam on, because otherwise that won't work. A little bit light because I have the monitors, but it should still be fine. Also, as you guys can see, we have a brand new package of graphics made by Pedro, who are really great. So not only a new logo, kind of a more of a graphics upgrade, I would say. We didn't necessarily rebrand, we just keep Lando, Tandy and Torn. They're cool, we're gonna keep them, just more of an upgrade going forward. You can also see that we are going to have a different approach to this draft stream, and the way we're going to do it is, as you guys can see, we're gonna go still over pick by pick, but during the whole draft you can see the entire draft. So we're not going to go team by team necessarily for each individual slide. You can see what's happening throughout the entire draft at one point. Now this took, at least for me, a lot more time to set this up, edit these slides. So if you guys are able to share the stream, it will be greatly appreciated. I personally think this is a really great approach, and no matter when you jump into the stream, you should be able to see what's going on. You can maybe understand better why people are picking certain things, because you can see what's already been going, and therefore should give you guys a better perspective of what is going on. But I'm not going to be alone here for tonight. That would be pretty lonely. So I have two people with me here, and we're going to start off with Aquarius, one of the new coaches in here. Say hi.
Hi everyone, nice to be here.
And then
I'm better than the other coach. Who's here?
Oh yeah, for sure. But we still we still need him, I guess, because apparently he's a back-to-back champion or something, so he can be here. We also have Fabs here.
Apparently he's the only back-to-back champion that has been in the UBL. Come on now, what is up, UBL fans? Vebs is here, your coach of the Helsinki Dragons and your reigning champions, and I'm really excited for this season. And there are a lot of cool new people, like Aquarius. Don't tell her that she's cool, but you know, she's a new coach that we have here, and we have several others that I'm familiar with, you might be familiar with, and then we also have some big names as well joining us. Someone like Under the Radar, who I'm really excited to see how he's gonna be doing with us. But stoked for this season, stoked for the lineup, and let's just get it rolling.
Yeah, because as always, we have returning coaches, we have newer faces want to give an opportunity, and some people we in generally wanted to join the league. So I'm pretty excited about this. The order you can see them is the order we're gonna, also do the draft order in. And for that, we're gonna start off with the Orange Douglas coach by Johnny GB, who is one of the returning coaches for this season, and they are going to kick things off with Tapu Lele for their very first pick, which obviously I've been using this thing myself recently, and I like I expected a bit more from it, to be honest, from what it actually ended up doing for me. But still, if you face a lot of teams with not that great of steel type, this thing is amazing. And also Ultra Player, thanks for the raid, man. Hopefully your battles went well. Ultra Player is actually one of the other coaches who you can see at the bottom. He's pick number 14. So we have that going on, you can check it out. But any other opinions on Lele before we move on? As usual, we're not going to spend too much time on each individual pick. You guys know what Lele does, I assume by now.
Aqua, you go ahead if you want to.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I mean, something we did say in the server when it happened was it was a little bit of an unorthodox round one pick, but I think it's still a decent mod nonetheless. So it'll be interesting to see what Johnny GB does with it, see if he capitalizes on that psychic terrain with a ton of different options.
Yes, and of course we're going to see more terrain settings, so we're going to see who's going to get Halucha on top of that as well.
Of course.
Then moving on to my pick, I was the second pick in the draft order, and we're gonna go with Dragapult, which to me was the obvious pick to make at this point. It's one of the most wanted mons on the format, one of the most consistent performing, and Go Spam is really, really cool right now, so I'm more than happy to have it, especially with the speed tier. It also immediately covers for me.
Yeah, besides being very, very original and typical pick of yours, well, most people cannot blame you, myself included, even how much I joke about it. Like, being consistent is understatement for Dragapult when throughout the generations, through AutoMattic's website, when you look at the statics, this thing is number one basically in every single category, whether it's Galarian decks, national decks, you name it. Every single type, it's top of the leaderboard, and currently in a standard draft format, it's the best one in the draft. So AutoMattc a little bit spoon-fed, not only being second, but also getting the best one. Now, I was kind of expecting Sony GP making this pick, but hopefully Lele still works out for him, and I expect this thing to do well for AutoMattc as well.
Yeah, and one thing I will say, this is not the first time I have Dragapult, and every single time I have it, I try to take a different approach with it. So just as this time, my approach is going to be really different. What I do with Dragapult than what I've been doing in the previous seasons. Also, for everyone who came in, I followed the stream, thank you so much. We're just going to follow up with Tapu Koko going to Irish Emerald and the Waxwood Whalers returning to the UBL after retiring around 1.5 years ago. They are back into competitive, and they are going to pick up Koko, which I think at this point was also more, like, depending on what your preference really is, the best one left after Lele and Dragapult went.
Yep. No,
It's not it. No.
I don't know. Coco's fine, I guess.
I gotta
It's
pull
solid.
Actually, Ultrabear, you're here. Give your thoughts on this. You have plenty of experience.
Yeah, I just showed up. What's
to
up?
go for.
Oh wait, that's right. We banned Mew. Okay, yeah, it was the best mon that was left. Yeah, I was thinking Mew. Coco's great. I mean, obviously, it's less good than it was before we found out it wasn't getting all the cool stuff. Whereas unwallable and basically the greatest mon ever, but it's still really, really good. Terrain spam can also always be really strong. It can be a great setup sweeper. It gets store power still, which is invaluable to this mon because it gets Iron Defense, Calm Mind, Taunt, Recovery. It's really good mon, and yeah, it was the best mon that was left.
Yes, and we'll see what they are going to do with it. Moving on to one of the new coaches, Q, and his Dragapult team here. They're going to actually pick up Rillaboom, and they're going to be the first team to pick a Pokemon from the 180 tier rather than the 200 tier. Now, we have seen before that if people don't pick a 200 or if the 200 mons were gone, Rillaboom is usually one of the first, most likely together with Corviknight, who goes from 180. But this time, it's going to go 4th overall. Do you guys think that's I mean, the one is good, don't get me wrong. Do you guys think that's too soon, or is this fine?
Well, I think you said it, is that the 180 pointers are, I mean, this is probably one of the best 180 pointers there are, and the 200 pointers are pretty expensive, so if you want to get a 180 pointer, I'd imagine this is the one to get. It's pretty interesting to see all the terrain going, but yeah, Rillaboom is a great mon. You see a lot of terrain going early, you see a lot of, like, very hard offense going early. I think that if Q was just sort of looking for a mon like that, it wasn't going to make him back. It wasn't going to make it back to him round 2, so I think it makes sense as a pick.
Yeah, I think that's important to take in notice that he might be up there for round 2. So if he didn't feel like any of the other 200 pointers, this was the one that he wanted.
Oh yeah, this would not
I
have
don't
made
think
it back to
Rillaboom
him.
this early is that bad because I also last season picked Rillaboom at pick 4.
Nice. But I get at this point, I'm the only one without terrain, but that's probably going to change soon, and that's actually going to change right away with Mitch, who joined the UBL as well, and he is going to pick Garchomp, which is a Pokemon that has actually recently seen more success, maybe in this gen than last gen, based on what is allowed, based on the new move it get, skill shot where it can boost its speed. First time as well that this thing is in the 200 tier, so we're gonna see if that is worthy. Do you guys think that that Mid will be able to get the 200 points out of this Garchomp?
I think at least it's worthy of 200. Like indirect, buff for it. It's obvious that hidden powers are gone, so a lot of electric types don't really get a proper coverage to nuke it really hard. And with this Sword Dance and Scale Shot, it can be a very threatening winning condition. And I love Godsum that it's so versatile as well. And I have only heard good things about it. I haven't seen it much in Wi-Fi scenario yet, but what I have seen and heard from Showdown community, once it came back into the game on international decks, it's performing in a very high level. So a lot of people will be backing this pickup, being worthy when it's been picked in 5th pick.
For sure. Moving on to pick number 6, which is going to be Exodrill and Incog, one of the new coaches as well, who is also going to dip down into 180, but I think just as Rillaboom, if you're going to go down to 180, then Exodrill is, assuming you're going to get sand later down the line, this is an understandable pick to just skip some of the 200 points at this point in time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Exodrill was...
It's Exodrill. We've seen it for gens. Sorry. We've seen it for gens. Like, we know what Exodrill is. We know what Exodrill does. We know it's always going to be one of the best mons in the format. It gives so much support. It gives so much offense. It just gives a lot of versatility with one mon. Like, we all know it. It's tried and true by now.
And we're going to see what Sandsetter is going to pair up with it, assuming he is. Because if you don't, then you're probably making some mistakes in your drafting process.
Yeah, there's 4 Sandsetters now. So it's now, like, more versatile to see how it's going to pan out with either, Tyranitar, Hippo, Snake, Sandaconda, and Pikachu, my favorite.
And then Hippopotas, maybe 20-point Mon. It's your 20-point Sand
Oh,
Setter.
hi, that's right. I've done that. Hippopotas is great.
Anyway, that can work. Then moving on to number 7, who is JV, one of the returning coaches after last season. After missing out of playoffs, he is going to come back and he is going to pick up Zeraora from 180 as well. Which Zeraora saw a lot of success prior to the second DLC coming out. With this DLC coming out, it is kind of slowed down, but still, the amazing speed advantage it gives you is still really valuable. And if you know your ways around with Zeraora, like I think Vaptis has used this thing a lot, you can definitely have some fun with this thing.
Yeah, and like it was part of my last season team. It's one of the reigning champion squad team. I'm gonna be missing Zeraora. I think even in this current meta game, as the second DLC came out, I think the speed tier is still too valuable. And I love the fact that with 180, he's basically giving himself a mod that can perform in a 200 level if you know in and out what it can do, what are the things that it struggles with. But off the bat, just that elite speed tier and fastest mod thus far being drafted basically gives him a nice foundation for his draft to work around with.
Yes, for sure. And again, like I said, if you make this thing perform to its absolute max, it can be worthy of 200. It's just that people have more struggle to do that since the release of the second DLC. But if this is the match for JV, then I'm sure he is up to something good. Well, then you explain that. Now you can explain your own pick with the Lando T. I assume this was just the logic of the best mon around you wanted to use, because it was probably like this or Celesteela or something like that.
Yeah, it was Celesteela, Landorus, and Tornadus there that basically were on the board that I was debating with. And I opted to go with Landorus Therian because I value ground type so high degree, even in this generation where Ghost type became the best offensive type in the game. But just hidden powers being gone, sure, Seamoose kind of suck that it doesn't have access to them, and therefore it's not like outright top 3 mon anymore. But it's still a very top high level mon that can perform in different ways. It's so versatile. I can bring like any kind of set with it every single week, and that's what I love about Landorus. Like it still can come into every single game and have an impact to it, and I love its typing still with the 2 important immunities to ground hits and electric type hits. So it's easy mod to just draft on your team, and you cannot go wrong with it, and you can go so many ways with it.
No, and I think for 8 overall, you really cannot complain if a Lando T falls to you.
Yeah, absolutely not. Like it. I was stunned that I had this thing and the other 2 at my disposal to pick from.
And we're actually going to see one of the others go right after being Tornadus Therian going to Aquarius.
Yeah, I've sat idly by in this stream so far and heard the slander that has been the fact that there's been other better mons on the board. Torn was the best mon left on the board right after Dragapult got picked, okay? It's an amazing mon.
Okay, so we're all in agreement that Aquarius is going to change that?
No. Torn is spectacular. Don't Don't even.
You've
It's
clearly never clicked Hurricane before. You've literally never clicked Hurricane before.
Look. If you believe that hurricanes will land, it'll land. It's perfect. You just have to believe in yourself. But the reality is I think that people give Torn a bad rap because, oh, okay, Hurricane's gonna miss, blah, blah, blah. It has to run boots every time. I think it's a lot more versatile than people give it credit for. I think it has an insane amount of coverage that it can use that prevents it from clicking Hurricane too often unless it's absolutely forced to. I think it can run extremely bulky sets given its high speed tier and can take on a majority of both especially offensive and physically defensive mons depending on how it's EV'd. Regenerator allows it to be a little bit more defensive than option with like Taunt, Toxic Sub, or just a Life Orb set was also benefited by its regenerator status. Like Elias was talking about earlier, getting a fast mon early on is also spectacular here. I just felt it checked like every single box, and I don't know, I haven't used it in a while, but I'm sort of the opinion that Torn is one of the better mons, and Nastplot is one of those reasons, but if not even, it's a luxury in my opinion. I think it can literally do everything, and I'm really excited to use it.
Then one of the other new coaches is going to be D-Ray, who's going to join us as well, and they're going to start off with Dracofish at 10 picks, also one of the monsters not in the 200 tier. So I think this is the start sign for us to all starting and grabbing our water immunities, as the fish has been found. You guys worried yet for your water immunities, or is this fine?
This is
Shout out to Fish. Fish is like one of the best Pokemon ever. This thing is stupid. This thing is broken. And me and D-Ray both know how to click that button.
Yeah,
I'm sure you clicked Fish's rant very skillfully.
Oh, I love this mon. This mon is great. I don't care what people say. I don't care what slander people give to it about water immunities and everything. You can overcome almost any single water immunity with Dracofish, except for like Gastrodon. Anything else, it's gonna go down. If you have a Lapras, low kick 2 KOs. If you have Seismitoad, it doesn't get recovery. Like, on and on. Dracofish is really, really, really threatening if you know how to build with it and know how to overcome those checks. Counters.
Mm-hmm. Alright, then moving to number 11, Root, one of the returning coaches. They're going to pick up Celesteela, which we talked about before. I've used Sting a lot, not in Gen 7 yet, or in Gen 8 yet. But I think this mon is just super reliable, super versatile. The best way to go about it is just to make sure it's not going to be defensive every single week. It can fill in kind of both roles, but again, I've never worked with a more reliable Pokemon than Celesteela before.
What I find so interesting about Celesteela in Gen 8 and how it's changed is if you look at the OU meta, you see that even variants of Celesteela are changing over there. You're seeing Autonomized Meteor Beam as one of the most common sets, which is something new that was offered this generation, as well as defensive sets. So just adding on to its versatility is absolutely spectacular. It probably got a few other new tools here that I'm forgetting about. I do wish it got Cosmic Power, but that might be a little bit of a bizarre hope.
That would have been bad, to be honest. If that thing got Cosmic Power, we would be giving it the boot.
It said it would in the DLC, they lied to us.
Yeah, luckily they did, otherwise this thing would not have been around anymore.
Imagine Cosmic Power, Autotomized Meteor Beam, Air Slash.
Spectacular.
No!
Awesome.
Nope.
Anyway, let's move on to Under the Radar. Now, one of the things that we have to tell you about Under the Radar is that he was originally not in the league. He took over for Skyrander, who couldn't compete anymore after he got a promotion in his work. Obviously, that goes first. We're really happy for him that he was able to get the job, and wish him the best of luck with that. And also the fact that he just said straight up, hey, he didn't fall behind. He just informed us right away, like, hey, this is the situation. I don't want to get things behind, so we greatly appreciate that. So you need to keep in mind that this roster was drafted by Skyrender, and afterwards, Under the Radar made changes to this, and we're going to show you the team with the changes, so not the original draft. So if you think something like, hey, that's kind of early or late for a certain Pokemon to go, that can just be that it is one of his 6 transactions that he made. They're just swapped out 1 for 1, so just keep that in mind with his. But his first pick could definitely be something that goes 12 overall. He is gonna go with Latios, which, to be fair, even with Hidden Power removed, this thing got Mystical Fire, so it doesn't even care that it cannot run Hidden Power Fire. It arguably got better, and no Pursuit to trap it with.
This thing
You
got
can tell that this was addressed
honestly,
by Kelly because it's not a Line Noon round 1.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, hidden power is basically irrelevant on this thing now, given how much coverage it got in Gen 8. In fact, it's probably better than it was in Gen 7. I think most people would agree.
Yeah, and also, fun fact, right after, we have Latias going into the 13th pick. 2 Dr. Slacking, so we see the Lotties going back to back in this league. Now, obviously, Latios is slightly better. Unlike last gen, they are the same price this time around. Mainly for the fact that Latios itself can just function a little bit better currently in this metagame than it could have compared to Latios in the previous generation. But nevertheless, still a really threatening mon, and something I'm sure that Dr. Slacking will be very comfortable building with. And I'm moving forward to Ultra players in this call as well. Aegislash at pick number 14, which, I mean, I love this thing. I love spammable ghost types, obviously, as you guys can see from my pick, but I had tons of fun using Aegislash in the WB.
So yeah, it's kind of sad because I wanted that Latios really bad. But
Yeah.
Aegislash, however you pronounce it, doesn't matter. Aegislash is great. I've used it a couple times. I know a lot of people want to talk about King Shield and the defensive stats and how it's a good type and all this. I've used it in 2 leagues. I've literally ran King Shield twice. I always just run offensive and click the murder button.
Yeah, same.
It's stupid strong. It's stupid good at setting up. It's stupid good at breaking. It's so good. And people just want to write it off as sometimes offensive, but overall just defensive. No, this thing is a truck.
Yeah, the dual stab plus CC is basically just hitting the format. There's no real out. Like almost no point when it does that.
It's like really phenomenal, and it's really great to be able to draft a high tier steel type for yourself, because those are going to be things that people struggle with fighting later on. So it's already an advantage in itself. Obviously, it doesn't get stealth rocks, but stealth rocks are a little bit less impactful now that heavy duty boots are back. So that might not be as big of a deal as long as you're getting a great mod like Aegislash.
And Aegislash is going to be paired up with a mon I hate to face. I'm sure it's good to just hate to face Galarian Zapdos. That Thunderous Kick is just so annoying for my playstyle. It's not even funny. And the sheer amount of mons to actually take Thunderous Kick into a Brave Bird or Thunderous Kick into Thunderous Kick is very low. Due to on top of that, the only downside to this usually is that it doesn't get roost, so it's harder to rely on recovery, but this thing usually just clicks buttons. By the way.
Not the chicken.
Yeah.
And a chicken. It's a chicken.
Doesn't really need roost. I once
It's a
lost
nice
a draft league. I once lost a draft league game by getting a psychic Spadef drop in front of a Galarian Zapdos, and then its Defiant went off, and then it destroyed my entire team. So it can just like destroy you out of nowhere if you're like not careful around it.
Oh yeah, and you cannot intimidate it because of Defiant. That's fun.
Yeah,
That's
it's a really nice mon, and anyone who knows my playstyle knows that I love to click hazards, or hazards, even if boots are a thing. So now I have Ghost and a Defiant right off the bat, and 2 very strong mons that if I don't get any other strong mons for the rest of the time, I'm pretty much set, because I have 2 breakers and 2 sweepers.
Oh yeah, you already got some power in the back right off the bat. Now something interesting happening here. We have the second pick of round 2 being Titar. So that Extra team will not be pairing itself up with Titar. Now we don't know if that was what they were going for, but they're not going to do it. And also more interesting, we see, which is kind of rare in Gen 8, a Titar drafted on its own, without Exadrill. Because without Pursuit, like with Pursuit taken out of the game, this thing kind of became a sand setter to that. Like, I don't know, I just feel for me that ever since Pursuit was gone, this thing was not really worth it anymore for me personally. I'm not sure if people disagree with that or not in this call, but
I disagree with that like pretty significantly. I saw Tyranitar at 140 on this tier and thought it was one of the most underpriced mons on the list. I think it's completely underrated as a standalone threat, being able to run both physical or special, set up in multiple different variants. I've seen weakness policy sets be really good, status spreading,
And
I just think it kind of does a lot.
It's really strong. It's really strong. Like, I don't think people really understand just how ridiculous 134 base attack is.
we're gonna
Well,
see.
paired with all the natural bulk too, boosted by the Sandstream. And massive Spadette.
I'm gonna
Well,
see
guaranteed always
if Slacken can make some use out of that. Going to the third pick for the round, Underrated picking up regular Scizor. Of course, Mega's not even in the game anymore, but Scizor is here. And Scizor Latios looks really nasty to me. Scizor getting that momentum for Latios to click buttons.
Yeah, we have be able to see with AutoMatthic a certain person using this combination together, and we can just tell from that experience seeing him doing that either versus us or just against the other opponents, like they do really well. And Scizor in this generation is just phenomenal. Again, hidden power being gone is actually a big deal for it, because now it can set up on things that usually it wasn't able to do, like grass types or anything in that nature. And now he has a little bit of like momentum core, because Latios also got bottom pass. So if this steel type is something Latios doesn't want to be able to deal with too well, or more importantly a fairy type, Scizor just comes in and he can just keep shuffling around opponent. And it's also a setup sweep in the back to take advantage of or utilize with properly if bulky fire type or bulky water type has been already weakened. So it's a fantastic mon. People sleep on it too much, and I'm actually kind of scared to seeing how Under the Radar uses it.
And one of the things to keep in mind as well, which we have with the more recent picks, something you'll see right now is that, especially around 2 and 3, is where people want to go with their budgets. Because obviously we already saw some people who went straight into 180. We now see Under the Radar going like 180, 160, so not even picking a 200. Which is going to enable or disable options later in the draft for people with their budget. Because all these slots needs to be filled. You cannot call quits early. You need to fill them all, and you need, of course, to stay within your budget. Which, next up, someone who is gonna spend a little more points though in the end, Victini, which is gonna go to the Celesteela team. Well, at least the Celesteela doesn't have to face his Victini now, I guess, which it's good for it.
Why did we let him get Celesteela?
I honestly hate facing Victini. I just never have a good switch in for it, like never.
Yeah, like with heavy duty boost, like it's disgusting, and poor Sword being gone is also a big deal for it, because now you're clicking B rate without any drawback basically, unless you worry about giving something a flash fire, like literally no drawback for a stab 180 base power move. That's nutty. I don't want to deal with that at all. I've used this thing recently in a National League, now I've been loving it. Such a good morning this gen.
Yeah, like I said, maybe the boosts are fine, but the pursuit is huge. Like, no drawback. It's so
Something
great.
else that's really nice that I think is underrated is the fact that it can also just run pads, and stuff like Drudigon, which would normally rough skin Rocky Helmet it, no longer can do that. Because the V creates for free and free and free.
Or just U-turn for free without like really any drawback until you can click the kill button.
Great.
Then moving back to the Snugglers, who are going to pick up Zapdos together with Dragonfish. They are choosing the route to go with 2 180 mons. We're going to see some different strategies here already. And as we all know, Zapdos is just a really reliable mon. Now, personally, I cannot get this thing to work, no matter what I try. I hate facing it, though. I just don't want to do it. It's either hard to kill or even underrated as an offensive mon. Something we could be seeing here as well is if D-Ray decides to go with a rain setter later on in the draft, he does have the rain boosted Vicious Rant. He also has the 100% accurate Hurricanes from Zapdos, which he does get right now.
Ultra might give a little insight
Weather
on
Ball
this,
too.
but it may or may not inspire him to do this route, because I've seen you having this together.
I use this exact core in NCP, and these two together, even though Fish, like I said, got a lot worse in the new DLC because of all the new mons, I can check it. Zapdos paired with it is literally the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. You always can just U-turn or Volt Switch out on like a ground type and just bring in Fish. And now Fish is in. Now what do you do? Don't know. It gets rid of the grasses. It gets rid of the waters with its dual staff. It can provide Tailwind support. Like I said, it can go good with Rain. Rain together is really nice, although I've never used Rain Fish yet. But great mon. See you, D-Ray. He is Ultra player. Hey, don't forget the clap.
Also, another great mon, at least one that I have used a lot in both this gen and previous generations. We have Mamoswine going to Aquarius here. And again, like, you cannot really go wrong with Mamoswine. So you just don't have switch-ins for it. As long as you don't over-predict and you click the right button every time, this thing is about to get some KOs here.
Yeah, it seems pretty good. I drafted it for 2 reasons. One, I haven't used Mamoswine before, and I just wanted to use Mamoswine. I could lie to you and say like, oh, it breaks the steals, it breaks the everything.
Mhm.
I don't know how would they pair together. They could pair together well. I have no idea. The second thing is that all my drafts always lose to Mamoswine, so I just figure you pick it up this early, you don't have to face it, and screw other people over with it. So I don't really have any like good reason I picked it in like a technical sense. I just wanted to use it and didn't want to face it. So winner, a sort of win-win situation.
I'll say this because I'm pretty sure I inspired both you and AutoMatthic. I know AutoMatthic had this in Gen 7 in UBL. That pick a offensive ground type and a fighting type with Tornado Stereo, because it's gonna be luring in those pesty steel types or bulky electric types if those happen to exist on the matchup. And Mamoswine fulfills that offensive ground type really well for Tornado Stereo. Not just covering its weakness, but also dealing big hits back to the things that Tornado Stereo might be luring in.
Yeah, just the result for me was Mamoswine getting killed instead of Torn. So Torn was kind of there on the team at that point. But anyway, great Mal. I gotta love it. Also, next up, we have Vebs' drafting. It has not been picked yet, so we all know. We all know. Yeah.
John is back, baby. I'm gonna bring back.
Oh my god,
The team cannot function without John. You gotta have him.
No way!
Oh no, I did not see that coming
What's the
at
next
all.
pick?
It covers so well the 2 weaknesses Lander says. I don't have to care about a water type or
Yeah,
an ice
yeah,
type.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
John
yeah,
keeping that thing out of
Whatever.
its way.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, sure. Anyways, we have JV next up, and he is going to pick up Corviknight with his Zeraora, which is for 2 180 months, really disgusting core. Of course, it deals with the ground weakness for Zeraora, and even though for some unholy reason Corviknight can technically 1v1 certain Zeraoras if they get too far, but Zeraora is not a Pokemon you want to face with Corviknight as well, so they take it out and it patches the weaknesses, so cannot go wrong here. And 2 momentum users already from the start.
I've seen this pair before. I've seen this pair before do really well. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of versatile options between it, both just being sort of a straight up offensive pivot core, or the fact that like Corviknight can set up screens and pivot into like a bulk up Zera. There's like bulkier options, more offensive options. I think it's a great core. Core is very versatile.
Are we gonna see a stand set? Are we gonna see something different being paired up for Inkok and the Exadrill? It's actually gonna be something different. They're gonna pick up Halucha and just say like, no, Rillaboom and Lele, you're not getting that Lucha.
Hold on. Oh, this is such a great pick.
Wait, I'm glad I got here on time. Let me tell you something about this. No terrain Halucha anymore. I am done with these people.
Oh, this is a great pick.
And I did it
100%. 10 out of 10.
And I needed it because, like, I looked at it and I said, why not grab the thing that will beat the terrains than the thing that will be typically paired with them? Also, a really good fighting collective. Like, honestly, you can do a bunch of things. In this generation, people discovered close combat plus white herb, so it's like, why not?
Because honestly, I had this thing myself as well, and it only terrain swept once for me. Like, other sets were way more useful for me because people, first of all, don't prep for it. They're just going to prep for terrain sweeping. And it's a really reliable mon, which is honestly outright stupid sometimes.
The fact that the quote-unquote new guy comes into the league and the round 2 is gonna be giving a big old middle finger to the guys waiting in the back with all the terrain centers and be like, nah, this is my spot, deal with it.
It's really strong. Like, Life Orb sets are really good too.
Yeah.
We're going to see how they're going to recover for it, though.
I've seen
Moving on.
CB do a lot.
Moving on,
yeah.
we have one of the teams, I think the only team so far, and maybe even going forward, that picks 2 200 pointers with mid, who is going to go Garchomp, Melmetal. So
Why was it here? Why was it here in late round 2?
I don't know, people pick different things.
You went straight offense and it scares me.
Bruh, do I? Oh my god.
I literally thought about picking this round 2, and then still to this day I'm thinking like, should I have done it? But like, it was 200 points, it's such a big investment, but it's kind of annoying to give me like Garchomp and Melmetal together, like come on now. Like bulky water type sure are annoying to him, but outside of that it's kind of like
I mean, even then, if your
gonna
bulky
be-
water type has to deal
gonna
with
be-
both Garchomp and Melmetal, they're not gonna have a fun time.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna
is
be
gross.
aggressive.
Now then, for the first person that got sniped on Hawlucha, we have Q, who is going to pair up Tapu Fini, because he was like, you know what, I cannot have the rain sweeping, I'm gonna prevent the Extra from getting it with Fini. So we have dual terrain
I like to imagine that just what happened was like Matt took Incog Sandsetter, so then Incog took all the sweepers with the terrain,
Alright.
and then Q
You
was like,
know,
screw you, I'm gonna take
Low-key,
all the
I
other.
did want Tyranitar for like 0.02 seconds. So I was a little bit peeved.
I like to imagine it's this like chain of snipage and just like it's just taking each other's needed freaking tech.
And he pairs well with Rillaboom, though. I do like this pick overall.
Oh yeah, I like the pair up, and it's definitely interesting to see how two terrain sets are gonna fare each other. But again, get a solid fire type with this, and you have an amazing core. Like there are no issues there. Then though, for arguably the worst pick in the draft, and I know we have to cut Irish some slack. He retired. He came back. He doesn't really know what's good anymore.
What is this?
He doesn't really know what's good anymore, so he just picked the Hydreigon.
Oh yes.
Hasn't won a championship that you call a championship when it was a tournament. This thing was the biggest MVPs for you, and you're gonna be like, nah, because it happens to be my mascot. We gotta shit on it. I don't care. It won't be a championship.
But here's the reality. It's not a Guzzlord, which means it's terrible.
No, it's fair.
It's horrible.
Why
It's
they
horrible.
create a Guzzlord
It's
when
not
they
a
have
Guzzlord,
this
so it's
already?
terrible.
Mhm.
I don't know. Pretty bad.
I just gotta do Irish stuff. Either way, probably had some Guinness before he did that. But moving on, and I wasn't really sure if this was ever gonna happen, but apparently stuff happens because I wanted to take a different approach with Dragapult here. And for the first time ever, I'm actually going to pick up Heatran, a model that I heavily criticized, like, ever since Gen 6. And barring a screw by Draft League, this is going to be the first time I'm ever going to give this thing a serious shot. So we're going to see how it will fare for me.
Great. I think it looked really, really good.
I'm genuinely curious to see. Like,
Yeah,
I would have,
that's really
I would have given it a second thought too in this gen, cause not many fairy types get to hit it too hard, other than like having access to Focus Blast, I think. And then there is Diancie that gets access to Earth Ball, but there aren't many fairies that hit it super effectively anymore because Hidden Ball being gone. So it is a fairy killer in this gen, when I do value it for that.
Oh yeah, and that's the reason why I picked it, because I want to deal with fairy types, I want to deal with normal types, and even for normal types, Heatran I know a little normal type with coverage. Typically though, the more passive normal types, Heatran can take advantage of as well. Also considering it does have taunt, it hits them hard, and they cannot really hit it back, so that's great for that. But moving on to the wheel pick, we're gonna see Alakazam here, going to the Douglas, so they are going to pick Dual Psychic, which again is more fine, there's no pursuit. And we have now Alakazam under terrain, as well as some speed that he probably needed too.
Expanding Force is disgusting. And if you don't pick up a good Dark type, this team is going to cause you nightmares, I assume, if he builds around it, right? I mean, that's basically it. Zam is like a truck, and if you can run like Life Orb, Magic Guard, Expanding Force, I'm pretty sure like even resists aren't taking that at all. So it's gross.
Yeah, and
I saw it and
access
was
to
like
both.
disgusted.
Like the game says resist, but I doubt that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Next to Dazzling Gleam and Focus Miss, so Focus Blast, but we call it Focus Miss because usually it misses, but it still gets the most to hit the Dark types in itself, and obviously Lele has its secondary stab to hit them, so even Dark types don't like this team, even if it's a Psychic Terrain Abuse team.
They do still need to worry about offensive Dark and Ghost though if you go this route, so that's something they will have to really consider going forward. And they're gonna not necessarily do that in this round, but they're gonna pick Ferrothorn here to also start picking up some defensive things, and of course some hazards which may help out for getting things in range for Lele and Alakazam here.
Yeah,
I have a
Ferrothorn
really weird take about this.
this gen for him, and hazards in general. That's the main thing that I saw that this adds.
Yeah, I don't know. My take on this is sort of that, like, I think this will be used best if he uses Feral offensively, like sort of as a spike stacker, like early on in a game, instead of like a sort of defensive wall. Because this team just looked built to be like terrain hyper offense. But I mean, as an early spike stacker, it's pretty good. I think there are other spike stackers that are probably better, but if he ends up taking a more defensive turn, then I think this pick makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Then to go back to my own, which is just something, it's probably the best mon to pair up with Dragapult. So even if I'm going to take some different approaches here, I'm still not going to handicap myself. We're going to pick up Mandibus. It's one of the most drafted mons together with Dragapult for a very good reason, because they cover each other's weaknesses, barring the ice one really fine, but hey, there's a Heatran sitting there, that's cool. And of course it also covers the ground weakness of Heatran. Other than that, I don't have to face Mandibus now with my Dragapult, so that's great. That's one less counter for you guys.
You make it seem like now you're unbeatable when you draft the Mandibus.
No, I'm not, but I'm saying it's one less counter for you to grab.
No, but like all seriousness, it's always do not see why it's always a nice feat. And Mandibus usually does its job pretty well. What do you need it for?
Mm-hmm. For sure, and I'm comfortable using it, so that's a plus as well. Speaking of bulk though, we're gonna have Milotic going to the Wexford Whalers, which still to me is it's a good water type for sure. Flip turn is hard to fit on it, but it still has the option now to do so. And it's not necessarily too passive compared to some other things like a Toxapex or something.
Yeah. I will say this, it is something that Irish Emerald's been using in his other Showdown leagues and has been pretty successful with, so just bringing it as a comfort pick makes a lot of sense. I haven't enjoyed Milotic as much as I thought I would in the other Wi-Fi league I'm in, because it just feels so strapped in like 4 move slot syndrome, but it takes on virtually every physical hit if you build it too, so it's good.
Yeah, it's no Sean, but it's alright. That's what I can from the
Smug or amongst me.
Mm-hmm. Then going back to Q, who is going to pick up Galarian Slowking. Which, unlike Galarian Slowbro, this thing can actually do stuff. This thing is actually threatening Trick Room without Trick Room or Nasty Plus, something like that. It does have Regenerated, but this thing, just the offensive pressure it puts you. I don't think that many people predicted this thing doing when it was introduced. But as of late, I've just been seeing a lot of leagues quickly bumping up the price for this mon.
You know what's a really good pick on this mon? Assault Vest.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Decent. It's a really great pick for Q at this point in the draft, honestly. Like, it pairs well with his 2 mons as well, covering weaknesses and such.
Mm-hmm. Which then we also have a Fairy Dragon Steel Core, because if you have Garchomp by Melmetal, you might as well just finish off the core, and Mid is going to do that with Sylveon. Now, obviously, there were some other things, like there was a Clefable, but I'm just sure he could not afford that. You don't go 200, 180. Like, that's... At that point, you're just asking yourself to pick a bunch of 20-point mons later down the line, but... even the Wish Support that this thing may add, even to Melmetal, like being just a bulky, like max HP, max attack variant, those Wish Splashes from Sylveon might actually come in handy in here.
Yeah, this is a pure comfort pick similar to Sean for me. I have seen Mid picking Sylveon a lot. And I mean a lot in the previous leagues he's been part of. It was also Sylveon and Melmetal that both were in his previous BBL season draft that this season just ended. The finals were uploaded yesterday, who were in there. So I have seen him just recently having these 2 together, and they still work really well. So I don't necessarily blame him. And like you said, something like Clefable, while it was available, you don't want to pick it because how strict you're going to be with points.
Oh yeah, because Sylveon is like 40 points cheaper, which definitely will help you out down the line. Then moving on to Inkok, who is going to pick up his Sandsetter. He's going to pick up Hippo, which... Actually, one of the things were you sniped on T-Tar, or was Hippo the plan?
Tyranitar, okay, so I was gonna pick Gigalith originally, but then I looked at my options and saw various weaknesses I couldn't combat. So, I said, I wanted Tyranitar originally, but then I saw it get picked and I said, well, there goes my comfort pick, so I had to go with Hippowdon. I haven't used Hippowdon that much. I used to play a lot of Sand, though, back in, like, Gen 6, Gen 5, and even Gen 7 to that extent. And Tyranitar was always my go-to. Never Hippowdon. So, I want to see how this goes for me, basically.
Mhm. Because of course one thing which I always said about the pairings for the Sandsetter is that Hippo has less common weaknesses with Exodrill. And on its own, even if you don't necessarily... It's not just a Sandsetter. This thing is a super reliable stealth rocker, super reliable defensive wall. If you utilize it correctly, that is. And really hard to break through.
Yeah, of course.
And then, pick number 3, we just were talking about it. JV is going to pick up Clefable, which now means we have to deal with Clefable Corviknight with the offensive pressure of a Zeraora. So that already looks fun. And with this, together with mid, he's actually on the lowest points currently after doing this. Although mid did 200, 200, 140, JV went 180, 180, 180, which also we don't, at least I haven't seen that too often, that someone picks 3 180s.
Yeah, it's gonna be expensive combination, and this is also something I've noticed. JV seems to be liking Clefable lately. I see him drafting this in another league that I'm with him. So this is something that I guess he's like really into as a fairy type, and I don't blame him. It's probably the best fairy type in a format between it and Coco, basically.
He has it in UPBA too.
Yeah, so this
which
is just the
is
comfort
sort
bit.
of Yeah, I mean, one thing I was gonna say about this is just like this is a crap ton of, well, not a crap ton, but a lot of slow pivots into Zera, which seems kind of gross.
Mm-hmm. Then also a comfort pick, something that's probably getting more comfortable to you is Pete Porygon Z, which I was kind of anticipating that you would pick it out. I'm not gonna lie, I was low-key eyeing on that thing myself for a very specific reason. At the one hand, I was glad you took it round 3, so I just know, okay, I'm not gonna plan for that. At the other hand, it's like, round 3 is kind of early for this boy Pete.
Yeah,
here.
no, I wouldn't recommend anyone at home to picking Porygon Z. But I have 2 championships from last 2 seasons. I can afford a little bit having a fun pick every now and then and not make the most logical choice when to pick it. And in this league, we have one person that had it last season, and I know very well that how much he likes this mod. I don't know if I sniped him to this day necessarily, but I made sure that I got it because Dr. Slacking actually likes this mod a lot. And it was still at 100 points for, so I assumed that if it would be taken, it would be him at some point of this drop. So I wanted to secure it early, and I'm really excited to use Pete in Wi-Fi, and I'm really looking forward to using it and give live commentaries how much excitement and enjoyment this mod can have, because it's a really fun and underrated threat.
And now you also have the most points left in the league currently, and assuming that other people will go below 660. Assuming they do. Which is exactly what Aquarius is about to do. Picking up Jirachi was also still lurking around here.
Okay. Well, I was looking at it and I was like, okay, I need a steel type. This is the second Wi-Fi draft I've ever been a part of, right? And the first time, finding steals is basically impossible in this format, I've learned. So I'm saying, okay, what's a good steel type? Steelix, garbage. Registeel, I don't want that again. Pharaoh Seed, terrible. And I want something with rocks too. So, I don't know. I was like, this is overpriced a little bit. It was 180, but it's pretty good. I've never used it before, and it's like a reliable steel with like recovery, which is kind of nuts. How often do you see that? And I was just sort of looking through its move pool and saw that it got a lot of new tech this gen, so I figured I'd give it a shot. I'm a huge fan of Mew. I know Jirachi and Mew are like not the same thing at all, but they,
not too far off.
The same EV spread and very great coverage and setup possibilities. So I figured I'd like it. I've never used it before, but it was similar enough to other things I've drafted. I thought it would be neat. And the fact it lasted around 3, basically, I felt that if I let it pass me, I'd like get really upset at myself for not picking it. So I picked it.
And the famous saying, if you have a Jirachi on the field, you always have a win con. No matter how bad your game is going, you have a win con. That's how powerful it is. Then another psychic type actually going to the snugglers here. They're gonna pick up Gothafel, which probably, even though we know Gothafel can do like trapping Calm Mind stuff, it's probably just here to trap the Dracofish switch-ins, I would assume.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's genius that he did this, because it either traps the Dracovish answers or forces the Dracovish answers not to run things like Helmet, which could hurt Dracovish like extremely much. So, and I think the fact that Gothitelle can trap just like basically every Dracovish counter or force it to hold an item that isn't very good for Dracovish is really gonna mess with D-Ray's opponents in prep. Like, this is the team I see the most that like seems the most difficult or meticulous to prep for, just because of how little counters you have to use threats already, and the fact that those counters could get trapped is just nuts.
Oh, for sure. So we're gonna see how much use he can make of that. Then for Rude, who just joined the call, picking up my favorite Rotom, and probably the most liked Rotom overall in the traffic format. Rotom Wash. To get a Victini is something we have seen before, but obviously also has proven to work. Rude's actually here. If not, we can just keep going. He's in the call, he's just not responding. Alright then. Rude. Okay, then someone else talk about how good the Rotom Wash is.
It's good. It's a good mon. It pivots. It's actually a pretty nice core with like Victini, because it like is something that not only switches into water moves, but like dishes back a bunch of good damage against bulky waters. It is just kind of, its one weakness is quad resisted by Steela, and I guess Victini too. It's just a nice pivoting core. They cover each other's defenses. And I think the other thing that's kind of neat about it, virtually every pick, maybe arguably not Victini, that Root has picked so far, is all these mons can be run like very offensively or like pretty defensively. So a lot of
that Victini maybe, like defensive Victini is questionable.
I think like for me probably the biggest selling point is that it basically lures in a fat grass type. What are the things that are coming on those? Well, his first 2 picks. So like he had already very good foundation to put Rotom Wash into, to be performing like he wants it to.
Hi.
Alright, just too late. That's a little unfortunate, because now we're at the Situai for Under the Radar, who drafted was also 660, so perhaps not the one with the most points. He has to share that spot for now. But we have the Situai here, which is another momentum user actually, and also fun fact, all his mons have defog so far. All 3 of them.
Is this a free agent, or was this something?
This was probably one of the free agents. I don't think Skyrand actually picked the Situai third, like round 3.
I mean, it's better now with Poltergeist for sure, which could be pretty big. I mean, it's early, but since it's a free agent, can't really criticize it too much. I do think that this team is looking a little knockoff-y, so we'll need to patch that up a little bit. But 3 defoggers is pretty crazy.
Yeah, enough slots to fill still though.
Yeah, and it keeps up having those momentum, and I know Under the Radar loves his pivot, so it kind of serves that role as well, besides being able to do multiple other things.
Also, third thing I just noticed, all his mons also have recovery. They all have roost, they all have recovery, and they all have a pivoting move. So there's definitely going somewhere. Something that's also going is Swampert to drop the slacking, which is the third/4th bulky water type, depending how you rate Rotom Wash the bulky water type. But this one gets Stealth Works though, which the Slowbro and the Milotic and the Rotom Wash obviously don't. Does lack recovery at some points, but does have Flip Turn now though, which can definitely be useful. I have only used it in Gen 7, where it was useful, but apparently people really rate Flip Turn Swampert these days.
Contrary to his name, Swampert is actually his favorite Pokemon just in general, like as like a nostalgia sort of thing. So I think this was sort of a, I want to really use this thing for the first time in draft sort of pick. I will say, for the people watching, there is a theme as a part of Matt's draft. I'm curious to see if anybody guesses it as the draft goes on. There is a theme that he's abiding to.
I'll say this, I would not guess the theme, and once it was said, it kind of opened my eyes and be like, oh yeah, of course. But maybe some people will realize it, we'll see.
Maybe, but until then, they also have the most points left now at 680, so you guys have been spending too much there. That for Ultra player though, a pick I absolutely adore. And honestly, if I did not have my own team, like I really dig Ultra player's team where it's going right now. Cinderace is phenomenal, even though it does share a weakness with Aegislash. They have the immunity in Zapdos, so there is some offensive synergy here, even for taking the hits. But another pivot, Fireball, stupidly spammable. Core Chase great, even though it's just crazy. Like Cinderace doesn't even have a wide move pool necessarily, but it just gets all the things it needs, if that makes sense. And I've used Link to great extent, at least in this generation so far.
Yeah,
I have
yeah.
a question about. Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
I was just gonna
say-
ask. Sorry.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
I was gonna ask how common core change is anymore, because I feel like I don't see it as much as I saw it at the beginning of this generation. But
it's
maybe I'm
more
looking
of
in
a
the wrong places.
It's more of a fear. Like, if you can fit it on, it's great. But something it definitely does, though, which I realized when I'm using it, is that not necessarily people care with their stealth rocks. They're still going to set up stealth rocks. But it really deters sticky webs users, for example, or toxic spikes. Like, if they get really risky being put back on your side, people definitely tend to bring them less versus Cinderace. Unless they really notice, like, if you're never running core chains and they do that scouting, then maybe.
It's interesting. Sorry, Nkog, I was just very curious.
No, that was me. But I was just gonna say that that I drafted Cinderace pretty early on in the generation before it really was well defined, and for me it was one of the most fun mons that I've ever drafted. It definitely wasn't one of the best mons that I've ever drafted, because it definitely does have like its hard stops and just kind of awkward matchups and matchups where it feels like it's kind of tacked on as like a sixth mon. But every time it was on the field, it was the most fun to use. And after I found out a couple weeks in that it's really at its best when you just find an excuse to throw a choice band on it, it becomes so much fun to use.
Oh yeah. It's just fun. It's not necessarily the best, even though I think it's really good. It's just a really fun and straightforward mon to use.
Absolutely.
Which does fit on a lot of teams. And they're actually going to pair it up with Weezing, Glaring Weezing here, which, if they run Levitate, that's another immunity for the weaknesses of Aegislash and Cinderace. So at that point it could be really cool. And looking at mods introduced in this generation, Weezing is one of the more reliable, at least from... I know Vebs has really hyped it up early in this generation. I really like using it. And again, it can be a toxic spike setter. It can be either a ground immunity or a grounded poison type to remove toxic spikes, which not a lot of things can do. And other than that, two really good typings combined with Sting and neutralizing gas on its own can just sometimes be rather stupid to face, not gonna lie.
Yeah, I think like adding those two critical typings in one mono is really big deal for him, because he has been spending quite a bit of points. So I think it was critical for him to secure this. And we knew, as he was early on the stream, he mentioned that how much he loves hazard stacking, and Toxic Spike is still one of the best hazard in the game, and this thing gets access to them, so it's really nice for that. And it also provides him a very good fighting check, so Aegislash and Galarian Zapdos don't have to necessarily switching on those. He has this in the back, filling that role. And I'm pretty sure Ultra Player has used this mon before, so this is just another comfortable mon for him to pick, and he knows what he's getting out of it.
Then for Dr. Slacking Magnezone is gonna join here, the Steel type Trapper, which honestly I can really agree with that paired up with Latias, which even though it does get Mystical Fire, do you want to run it every single week, and do you want to get chipped in the process of because Mystical Fire doesn't OHKO most Steel types. It deters them for sure, it doesn't OHKO them. So at that point, being able to free it up with Magnezone is at that point a great option in my opinion.
Yeah, I think not only just freeing it up like for the steel types that Matt will be facing, it also helps T-Tar as well. But it looks a little bit like Matt kind of struggles with bulky waters right now, so such a strong electric breaker like Magnezone is pretty good for him.
And
Yeah,
did someone guess it? But this
choice.
is hard gen for OU. Was that the team he was going for?
Maybe.
Maybe, because it kind of is indeed.
The only thing that I'll be looking for is how many times he decides to bring some form of body press, iron defense, because that's what I'm most excited to see if Matt brings it.
Yeah, of course we also see like the Magnetized set being really used for traveling, but the body press is great on this thing, especially for unlike steel types trying to switch in on this thing if they don't really care for tweet traps. Then moving on to Under the Radar, who's going to pick up Suicune, which is the first mon without I guess, reliable recovery unless you want to counter rest. The first one without momentum and the first one without removal. So that team is out the window, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Everything has recovery when you get rest hog.
Nah.
Exactly. Exactly. It's the best form of recovery, man. Who needs any kind of like one recovery? But all seriousness, this covers just a really well the fire weakness that he had. A couple of his other mons like the Sitsuai Scizor covers the ice weakness between the Sitsuai and Latios. So the resistance that Suicune has and what kind of hits it can tank for days is really, really valuable for this team, like what he was looking for. And I'm not sure if Kelly has actually used this one, at least in Wi-Fi scene that I have seen in the past. But if he has, I'm sure, or if he has or has it, I'm sure he's getting a lot of value out of it because he obviously has faced it at least a few times already by now and knows what kind of stuff you can run with it.
Now going to Root, you can actually talk about his picks. We have Porygon 2, so that's another like pivot option like Rotom probably also was for your Victini.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I was trying to say, but I realized that some of my Discord settings were off. Were that when I was looking at kind of the pool of waters, Rotom felt like one of the most dynamic. Where I think it's a little bit clear at this point that one of my goals is to try to just pivot into V-Create as much as I can throughout the season, and Porygon 2 is just a mon that I've always really wanted to get, but I feel like I've always kind of just waited around too late and somebody else takes it. So it felt like as good a moment as any in kind of early round 4 to just get this thing. And it's a mon that I've always wanted to use in draft. I don't think I've ever used it in Wi-Fi, but especially now that it's able to teleport and kind of do a lot of new things and the way that it works with my team and starting to create like a kind of pivot core, I am really excited about how it's gonna do.
Yeah, and this is like you said before, like round 4 to 5 is usually when Porygon goes. So it's a big question mark if this would have made it back to you at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then going back to D-Ray, who is going to pick up Roserade, which I firstly gave a try like in a league of 1 season back. I really do big Roserade here. He also gives himself the he gets removed T-Spike, set down for the Dracofish too, which is kind of nasty. Other than that, I'm not necessarily like synergy wise. I guess there is something like the Fire and Water Grass which you can start, but really reliable mon on his own, even without the team here.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that worries me is that now he's kind of providing himself either toxic spikes or spikes, if not both, in the same matchup that Djokovic loves to have. And when Gothither is already forcing those cells, he will have spikes up. Then he has the Dragovic and Zapdos. Like if you think about this, like when you have to prepare for this, there's so many stuff you have to start covering because of this Roserade on being on this team. Like sure, it lost the hidden power technician combination, but it's still very useful mon. This was a mon that I had last season and I was still really happy using it. And I still think it's a phenomenal grass type and a poison type to use in draft league.
Poison Point is best set for us right now. That's something people still are not ready for, but it definitely is. Something else we need to see if people are ready for is this Primarina, which is, from my own experience, really annoying to deal with defensively at the very least. Not even Calm, just specs, stuff like that. Surprise Aqua Jet, catching some people off guard too.
Yeah, Primarina's a lot of tech that I kind of like forgot about until I drafted it. It has some nice stuff, and the thing about Water Fairy is, and we'll just end here with the fact that Primarina is an insane special attack set, is I don't really think it needs that much coverage very often. On top of what it already uses, so it kind of freely can run Flip Turn, Aqua Jet, Encore, like random stuff more often than other like offensive water types, like Azu, for example, which shares the same typing as it. I think it's a little bit less pressed for coverage just based on how hard it hits, especially. But like you said, Calm Mind is pretty nuts too.
Yeah, does this thing actually get like Whirlpool Perish Song as well, or is that another one I'm confusing?
Yeah, it gets a lot. It's like Perish Song, gets like Screens, gets like flip turn, encore, kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've drafted it before, and rarely did I ever find myself really like struggling to want to bring more than like dual stab on it. And now, like you said, with flip turn, it just makes it easier to just kind of fill out the move slot and make this thing a lot more difficult to deal with.
Then to go back to Vepsis, which I guess to complete the core, we're gonna see Registeel being reunited with the Slowbro again, which was to be expected at this point.
Yeah, this was a case of that a lot of steel types, as we can tell, we are basically halfway through a 4th round, and a lot of steel types being taken, and I mean a lot of them. There weren't too many left, other than like 120 pointer Cobalion, Metacross, or then the 80 point category of Resisteel, Bronze, or Copper, so things like that. So I started to think like, okay, from those things, point value wise, what do I think is the best bet for me, value wise, and a fit on the team? And I think Resisteel just automatically was the first choice that I thought that, yeah, it has to be this thing. I will say Magnuson was high on my tryout list, and sadly it did go, but when it did go, it kind of made my decision a lot easier what to go at this point.
Yeah, I guess another option, which for me would have been like Steelix or something, but that's obviously like you want to secure, like you don't want to have a team with a steel type you're not comfortable with.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, I think the thing that's better about Registeel than like Magnezone 2 is it gets rocks, and you don't want to like have Lando forced to be running rocks every week. Like it's a pretty reliable rock.
Yeah, that's an issue that Ultra Player or Status Lacking did not have, because he already had like T-Tar and Swampert for rocks.
Yeah, okay. The Steelix was also another steel type that I would have loved to try. That is a bossy steel type and a reliable one. I just didn't want to add a steel type that doesn't resist ice. I think it was too big of a deal for me to have that on my team.
Vepsis. I feel like you and I drafted Registeel for a long time back, and now it's just infinitely better with Body Press. Like, it cannot be overstated just how much better it is now than it was even a generation ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Like in past sense, you would argue it to be too passive. Now all of a sudden it can be a winning condition if you pull the Iron Defense Body Press, and it's been a winning condition for me. It gave me a 6-0 win in PBR that I was playing last season, which I couldn't do last generation at all with this thing. So it's definitely a big asset for this thing.
Then moving on to JV, who is going to pick up Haxorus. So Fairy Dragon Steel Core is complete. Corviknight, Clefable, Haxorus, and again on top they had the Zero Aura already. So even though this team, also looking at their budget, they are at the lowest currently, is probably going to be top heavy. They're going to make sure that at least it's good top heavy in terms of headaches for opponents to deal with. I used Haxorus in the very first Generation 8 season of the UBL here, and honestly I really like it. I'm not sure what happened with the DLCs, how good it still is currently compared to other things. But like first impression, CC, Stab, EQ, Salt Stance, Dragon Dance, this thing has options and this thing has the tools to be a really threatening one to go up against.
Yeah, this is like a dragon type that is high on my list to try in Draft League format. Like this thing with first impression and scale shot now in this gen, really nasty. Like its choice bandit set and setup set became so much better already than it already was, and he just finished a very disgusting Dragon Fairy Steel Core for those that care about it. I'm not necessarily saying that you need to have those, but it's nice to have, especially if you get a high tier dragon, which are usually always worth to give it a shot. And actually still kind of counts for me as a higher tier dragon that can perform well.
That a Pokemon I've personally not have too much experience with, mainly because like out the get-go I didn't really see it perform or liked it. But Inkok is going to pick up Volcanion here, which I think is one of those mons, if you're comfortable with it, it's really annoying to go up against, but you need to be knowing what you're doing with this thing.
Well, another thing is...
Oh, go on.
I was just gonna say another thing is I think it's a team that really needs, or it's a mon that really needs its support around it and to have like proper switches in. It's a fantastic mon, but it can also leave you really out of position if you just have Volcanion like as your fire and water type and no real like switches into its weakness with a lot of mons. But with this mon in particular, it's not so versatile that you can just stick it out there and hope for the best. It really needs to be supported more than most.
Yeah, I was gonna say that it's a terrible bulky water, but it's a great offensive fire and decent offensive water, I think too. But I think if you drop Volcanion, you need a bulky water on top of it. Even though it gets water absorb and stuff, like I still think that it can't carry itself defensively, but it can dent teams.
Yeah, if only to free it up, so it just doesn't have to do it. You just need that bulky water type on top of it. Other than that, though, we can go to speaking of bulky waters.
Or and strong grass type to deal with bulky waters. That's the big glaring need for this team after picking that thing.
Speaking of bulky water types, though, we have Slow King going to mid, who obviously had to dig a little bit there after spending so much points on his first 2 picks, but he got himself some regenerator pieces here, and even though this thing is not defensively as good as Slowbro is, it still got the same buffs this generation that Slowbro had, so it still has the teleport option. Mainly that's probably the biggest difference here compared to last gen for it.
Yeah, Slowking, or as I call my Slowking in AP Academy, Stefan, is also a phenomenal teleport user, and I love the fact that he has a Melmetal, and now he has a regenerator mod that has access to Trick Room and Teleport. So all of a sudden, that duo can work really well for him and provide him like a Trick Room aspect on the team. And if he has some proper speed on it too, he has a lot of different tools to work with regards to speed control and how to kind of like dictate the battle and his own game plan. So Slowking, I think it was actually a really nice fit for this team, and I think it was like probably one of the best picks of this round when you consider what he provided to the team.
Then to another team that already has a Slow King, but another one, they're actually gonna pick up Raikou here with Kusade. Of course, one interesting thing though is that this thing now has Scald. So if your ground type wasn't already afraid of Rillaboom and Tapu Fini, you now also have to worry about the electric type literally having Scald, which is one of the most used moves in the format. So again, I doubt that those ground types are going to be much of an issue for that Galarian Slowking here.
Yeah, with the Grassy Surge, and it seems cute to source it. I have Grassy Terrain, let's draft these ground weaknesses, it's fine. And it seems to be working out here because he's able to get some speed, he's able to get some bulk. And it finally gives him a little bit of a pivoting core with Rillaboom too, which I think is pretty neat.
For sure. Then going to Irish Emerald, who is going to pick up something that I've used with Coco together as well, which I can really approve of, is the Nidoking, which phenomenal breaker. 2 really good offensive typings, obviously Toxic Spikes as well, can absorb Toxic Spikes, and in general just one of the more easier breakers you will find in the format to run without too much thinking into it.
I think more important, like instead of like thinking pairing it with Coco, I think the bigger impact is pairing it with Hydreigo, because that thing will lure in those pesky fairy types that it hates. And Nidoking loves to coming on those things in itself, so this is actually a pairing that I have in NCP currently, and Nido plus Hydreigon, or like any kind of like dragon that gets access to U-turn is always a phenomenal fit, because it just breaks through those fairies, breaks through those steel types, and for Coco in itself, like you had it, like one of the main reasons Nidoking works well with that it deals with bulky grass types that Coco might not be able to break itself. So great offensive synergy, similar to Slowking, probably one of the better picks for their draft in itself.
Then going on to my pick, which is something I'm really excited for. I haven't used this thing. This thing keeps giving me so much headaches. It seems like a very fun Pokemon to use. And like I said, I still needed some. I already got my Fairy Killer in Heatran. I still need a killer for normal and dark. And Heracross seems like a really great pickup in that sense. And again, something I've been wanting to use for a very long time.
Yeah, Heracross is a menace with like, thanks to the fact that Burn got nerfed cards, it became so much better. And this thing is disgusting to try to switch into with Facade and Dual Stab.
Yep.
Only thing that I wish it got access to was something to hit Fairy types, but if they don't take Facade well enough, they're not necessarily switching either if you click it on the right moment. So, very solid mod, I'm sure you're gonna be loving it. I've been actually recommending this to a good friend of us, Martin, as well. He's been using it a lot here, and he's been like, oh, yeah, this mod is really good, I need to try it more often. So, whenever someone gives it a shot, usually you only hear good things about it in itself. So I'm sure you're gonna be enjoying it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And this is also something that can relatively easy switching on ground hits too. So not necessarily the Mandibus that has to do all of that stuff. We have Heracross too that can just spam buttons. More of a pick we don't usually see. Like, this one gets undrafted a lot, but we're gonna see the Douglas here picking up Gyarados, which, even though it goes undrafted a lot, this is still a scary thing and something you have to prep for, because it's one of those mons where if you get one turn wrong against this thing can easily sweep teams.
Yeah, this thing's nuts. I really like it. I think that it is actually a Dragon Dancer that has a lot of natural bulk to it, especially paired with Intimidate. Moxie can make the team, could make it just completely sweep different teams. People overlook the fact that it got Power Whip this generation, which means it's one of the, it means it's a Dragon Dancer that breaks through bulky waters, which is kind of nutty. I just think it's pretty good. You just have to, I think it's kind of matchup dependent is the only thing. Like, if it has good matchup, it's like one of the biggest threats you'll face. But, you know, if you have some kind of mon that takes it on or doesn't have coverage for it, then it's not as good. But I think it's a little matchup dependent, but when it has matchup, it's like one of the scariest things you could fight.
And it's going to be paired up with Crocodile, which, I mean, Root can go on the Gyarados later on, but Crocodile is honestly one of my favorite dark and ground types in the entirety of this game. For, again, this is what I said with things like Weezing and stuff. It's super reliable of a Pokemon, no matter what you want it to do. But you can fill in on that or the Gyarados.
Well, yeah, no, the only thing that I was going to say about Gyarados was that it's a super interesting mon because it has three great abilities, so it has a lot of versatility depending on the matchup. When it can have like when it can be built really differently depending on the matchup. But what I was gonna say also was that it puts a lot of pressure on him to pick up a really good ground type to kind of support it, which leads it into this thing. And I don't know, just one thing that kind of goes on overlooked a lot is just how difficult it can be to kind of maneuver yourself around double intimidate in draft league, and it sounds like a silly thing. It sounds like it should be easy enough, but when you're in a game and you have to deal with double intimidate, it becomes a lot more difficult than it would seem.
Also, in terms of offering setup opportunities for the Gyarados with the double intimidate, if you don't want to be like Moxie Sweep, just like get the opportunity to set up on something. To go back to my next pick, and this was something that I was really happy that it made it to me, because Whimsicott was, in our preparation, crucial. Not only for the typing that it offers me, but also for the speed here that it offers me with my current roster here. And therefore, I was like, I know that Doctor's liking an Ultra player like Whimsicott, and Whimsicott is most often a mon that goes later, but I was really worried that either of them was going to pick this thing up before me, but luckily for me it made it round 5 to me, so I was not going to give them another opportunity to snack that thing away from me, given how hard it would have been to replace this for me.
It's a great pick here. Yeah, because it fills a speed tier, it pivots on the steel type, so allows Heatran to be more offensive, and even Heracross as well, and it takes defog pressure off Mandibuzz. Shit.
Yes.
Yeah, it's good. Well,
Yeah,
I didn't know.
and like, oh yeah, shit. Actually, no. Like the main thing for me was the speed here, which it fills between Dragapult and some other things I'm going to pick. Is that it was crucial to get one around like 116, 115, just to like force natures the way I wanted to. But moving on, another great pick here for Irish, which is going to be Bronzong. So even though he has 2 mons weak to ground in Hydreigon and Nidoking, or Coco Nidoking, he now has the Bronzong and the Hydreigon to deal with that, and another Stealth Rock setter, which will take pressure off on the Nidoking. And overall, like Feta said, Steel type were going fast, and this was one of the more reliable ones still left.
Yeah, and it just goes really well with Nidoking in itself, covering basically all of its weaknesses really well, barring like water, which we already had Milotic to be able to switching into water type hits for, or Hydreigon, depending which one he wants to use. So It's just one of these cases that he wanted to cover the steel type like I did while we still could. So we didn't end up having to either spend more points that we would like to for Metagross or Cobalion, or have to go a little bit more sub-optimal compared to either Resisteel or Bronzor, which are usually the highly sought after from the middle tiers when it comes to steel types.
Then moving on to Q, who's gonna pick one of my mons after trying this thing out. Has actually been one of the more fun mons that I gave a try I never used before, and it's Moltres, which heavy duty boots makes this thing insane. It already hit hard, but this thing could be a lot of things. Besides it being a breaker, it's a really cool steel check too in a lot of ways, and you just don't know how good this thing is until you start doing calcs with it, both offensively and defensively. Even before boots, it can remove its own rocks and roost up. Boots just help it to prevent those type of situations. Another momentum gainer as well, which now they have like Rillaboom, they have Raikou, they have Moltres. And again, this team just really does not care about ground anymore, also with the Moltres added on top of it.
Yeah, and I love the fact like he's taking away one of the best counters to Rillaboom in the game that are available to us to draft in itself. So in that regard, it's kind of like similar idea that like you have used and a lot of people have done in the past throughout the generations. That's trap mons a way that you don't want to face with your higher tier mod that you really want to make shine. And Moltres just also fit into really well to be able to deal with those bulky grass types for him in itself, and also just being that ground immunity, something just off the ground, so he doesn't have to rely on the terrain in itself alone.
And finally, Steel Gardon.
And Moltres does a lot of things well, but it doesn't particularly deal well with really strong waters, and he has some of the strongest water pressures in the draft right now. So these two this pick with the Rillaboom and the Raikou fit really well together.
For sure. Then to mid, who is going to pick up a fire type as well in Salazzle. So more on the faster side. Like currently on this team, if you're a mid team, you're either really fast or really slow. So he probably has to spend some picks in between those. But I definitely dig Salazzle in terms of what it offers as a setup sweeper, in terms of corrosion, toxic, which a lot of people don't like. Even stuff like sub-toxic protect, which people sometimes run, is really nasty with this thing. Even though Hidden Power Ice being gone kinda sucks for this thing, it still has its moves like Dragon Pulse and stuff, but still stinks, but definitely, besides that, a very reliable mon here.
I think this is actually a really underrated and nice pairing with Melmetal in a way, cause this thing literally can toxic anything. Anything you want, but most likely it's gonna be toxic in that bulky water, which means that Melmetal doesn't necessarily have to put that in on its move slot, and it's gonna be more threatening if the water type is already on a timer in itself. So it's a great lure mon to help out one of his higher tier picks that he already had.
For sure. Then going on to Inkok, who's gonna pick up Togekiss. So I'm not sure if Aquarius was planning on this, but we're not gonna see Togekiss Jirachi in this league here. But to be fair, Inkok definitely needed another ground immunity here, because he had his Exodrill and Volcanion weak to it, and so far only Holucha to really deal with it, but you want Holucha to do different things. You don't want that to be your ground switch in.
Yeah, I wasn't planning on this, but I was thinking about it a little bit. Well, I wasn't thinking about it, but it would be evil if I did it. No. I think Togekiss is great here. It gives them a little bit of a nice in-between speed tier, but it gives them offensive flying options that's not just like exclusive with Lucha, since Lucha's sort of a late game mon. It gives him more hazard clearing, I suppose, but I think it's really just a fairy type that is what's great about Togekiss.
Yeah, and honestly, this is nutty to me because even just before the Tapus came in I believe the last DLC, this was easily a top 3 to 5 fairy, and now it's going out in like the 5th round. It's just nutty how much the Tapus have changed the way people draft now.
Yeah, it makes its fault to this pick, but again, also the ground immunity and in general having a fairy type was probably what he was after as well.
Not a lot of points left though.
Oh yeah, not a lot of points. JV of course already digged in a lot of points, but they're gonna pick up Serena here. So they're still trying to make every point count, because Serena is honestly also one of the best mons in its price category. A lot of people don't even know this thing has triple axle now, which makes it really nice. Both for offensive and defensive option, I think this is one of the better grass types he could have picked based on what's left, and also looking at how much points he actually could spend on this grass type.
Yeah, I was livid. I could not explain to you how angry I was at this pick. Because, look, I'm already not doing great on points. Grass type's already not great on the board. This was going to be like my way of kind of making a lot of the points work for a lot of the rest of the draft, because this was obviously kind of a more budget grass type that I love. I could not tell you how much I love Serena. I think it's easily one of the best, budget grasses in the game, and it's a mon that I just adore using. But he also likes using it, and he has a habit of taking my spinner mons away from me in the UBL. He did this last season as well, and I could not tell you how upset I was at this one.
Because were you going to pick it this specific round as well, or?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. It was going to be my next pick, 100%.
That sucks. Something that did go though is Viking Hold as well to Vepsis, which really great mon to use as well, and gives you another ground immunity as well for your Registeel. But other than that, it gives you sticky webs. Your team's not all too fast, but I'm sure we'll see changes to that later. In general, a really hard hitting mon, and one of the electric types that can actually hit ground types still.
Yeah, mainly I wasn't thinking about too much sticky webs, while it can come into play for my later picks. But currently I wasn't really looking at that angle, just adding that kind of aspect to it. It was more so adding a strong electric type to deal with bulky waters, because my team in itself, I don't have too many things to really hit them too hard. I have some covers to hit them, I can toxic them, but I have nothing to nuke them. And Bigger Volt is there for that, and giving me very powerful Volturn Core with its 145 special attack stat, which combined with Landers-Terrian attack stat is pretty strong with coming of its own U-turn. So it kind of came into that aspect of what I was looking from it, and it gives me another fighting resistance for my Pete and for my Registeel. So typing wise kind of fit into the team, but more importantly just killing those bulky water types, what I need is really for.
Then moving to Aquarius, who is going to pick up a second Regenerator mon. This pairing we do see before with Tornadus and Mienshao. I'm not really sure if you picked it necessarily for the regen. That's a lot of reason people pick it up.
Well, it was
in
kind
general
of just
a reliable fighting type.
I will say Mienshao is one of those things I saw on the board at 100 points, and I was like, whoa, that seems kind of underpriced. Because I don't know, the way I was looking at it is I was thinking of it as kind of like a tier draft, and like sort of in my mind boiling tiers down to like 20, 18, 16, whatever. And the thought of like a 10-point Mienshao is kind of nuts to me. But I was sort of just listening to Vepsis, and Vepsis was like, well, like you said earlier in the stream, like get a good ground type, get a good fighting type, Tornadoes goes ham. I already had the ground type, and it was sort of like a cheap fighting type that hit extremely hard, broke steals, and had regen, and like was speedy as well, which sort of checked just every single box. So, bam, Mienshao, boom.
And then next up we have Rubumbi, who is going to go to D-Ray here, which also offers sticky webs for Dracofish, which we don't like. He already said, hey, hazards are cool. He has spikes, he has sticky webs, he has toxic spikes. Another potential set threat, even though I think Rubumbi is one of those fairies that really dislikes hidden power being gone, because it really cannot touch steel types currently. But again, you can trap those with Gothitelle, because that's also there.
Yeah, I mean, I think really D-Ray is just finding every possible angle to benefit Dracovish and just slapping it on this team, and it's working. I mean, it's like, get the webs, help Dracovish. Get the spikes, help Dracovish. Get the trapping, help Dracovish. Get the Zapdos, trap the waters for Dracovish. Like, I think everything just sort of points towards how can I help Dracovish be even better than it already is. And Rubumbi adds to
Then
that.
you cannot also undersell the fact that like finding a lead speed can be somewhat tough depending on what you already had in your draft. And like typing wise, it just made sense for him to add like a fairy type and a bug type and the sticky webs and the 123 speed tier, if I remember right. Around that
something
category
like that.
basically is its speed tier. So it just provided a lot of nice tools for his arsenal in his draft.
Then going to Root, they're not going to change things up. No Serena, but Zarude is going to be added, which is both more expensive. And is it something you've used before or not?
Not in Wi-Fi. So actually, Kelly and I were in a friendly Discord league. We're just a closed off Discord where we all just decided to start up a league there. And there I did have Porygon and Zarude together, and it was a lot of fun. I can appreciate that Zarude is a lot of fun, but it did just hurt in the moment, having to spend a little bit more than I wanted to on a grass type that probably wasn't 40 points better. But it does do a lot for me. It does give me an interesting dark type. It's still really strong. I believe it and Serena both have the same attack stat, but this thing is faster. It's more versatile on paper. It does a lot of things for me that I feel like I need. Still very hurt about Serena, but at the end of the day, I still got to snipe Ultra Player out of his next pick. So that if there's any silver lining, that has to be it.
Alright, that still works. Then going to the second Rotom, which is Going, which saw a lot more hype this gen because of heavy duty boots. We have under the radar picking up Rotom Heat together with this team. So now it's just Fire, Water, Grass Core into Decidueye, Suicune, Rotom Heat. Well, and I guess Suicune really is the odd one out here because now all other things have momentum and defog again. Like Rotom has Pain Split, if you want to count it as recovery too, but yeah, momentum and pivots are back here.
Yeah, it feels weird seeing a Rotom Heat that's not going to Vepsis this time, but
he added a lot in the UBL, yeah.
Yeah, but I like for his team that it's a ice resist, and more importantly, I think it gives him a more reliable fairy resist, because a lot of fairies got access to Mystical Fire, but they don't really have most to hit Rotom Heat. So in that regard, I think adding this type of fire type was pretty nice for his team, and it just gives him more momentum besides, like you said, Suicune doesn't have, but everything else basically has, and he loves pivoting, so it kind of makes sense for him to keep it around.
For sure. Then going to the Snover here again with Flygon, who is, I think, recently moved down in price. I have to fact check that if it's actually 80 right now, but still a very fun Pokemon to use here, and they're still going to keep up with the Gen 4 OU theme, with Flygon being here. Although, if he wants to be true, I think we need to settle here. If he goes for Gen 4 OU, he should limit himself to Gen 4 OU, says. Like, no first impression on this Flygon. I don't want to see that.
That's what I was telling him earlier. He can't be flip turn on freaking Swampert either. Nah. You gotta do pure Gen 4 moves then.
Yeah, if you go for that, then go for that. That's something you want to do for sure. Now, one of the water types still left in round 5 is Vaporeon, very reliable as well. Particularly shines if you can make this thing a Spadef wall. And the reason why that might just be able on this team is that Weezing is a really good physical wall. So as long as the typing wise works out, also player may have just given himself a very cool way of utilizing the better bulk stat on each of his Pokemon here.
Yeah, and in my mind, one of the mons that I think just benefited most from getting a flip turn because it was already so good at what it does that flip turn just makes it more unpredictable and more kind of difficult to deal with.
Yeah, like Vaporeon usually kind of struggles with 4-move syndrome, and flip turn might add into that. But thankfully, Galarian Weezing also gets access to Aromatherapy, so him having Galarian Weezing kind of takes away Vaporeon's role, what it needs to try to fit into its 4 moves, because that's always the most difficult part. What I can tell, I never used it, but that's usually what I can tell from opposing side, that people might struggle when they're using it.
Mm-hmm. And that will be paired up
team
with
looks pretty good
Rotom.
at breaking like Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah. I was just gonna say his team looks really good at breaking like off like grasses a ton, but needs a little bit more work.
Yeah, and then he
electrics and
drafted Rotom
defensively viable.
Yeah, then you got the Rotomo, which I really appreciate the Rotomo in this gen as well, with like Volt Switch,
That
but
was a
Leaf Storm is
snipe.
kind of nasty, and that's another snipe here. I got here.
Thanks, Root, for picking Ultra Player's thing so he could snipe me so that everything could go haywire for my side of things. But whatever. This was something I really wanted for my team for like pivoting and another defogger and a grass type, and it got taken and everything went to shambles. But it looks pretty good on his team. So
Also, when I saw all of you guys talking about the grass type snipes, I was like, yeah, I picked a really good round to pick Whimsicott at second in this round. Because I don't have to deal with these
your time could
shenanigans
not be
anymore.
better.
And anyways, we're gonna move.
Yeah, especially just with Dr. Slacking just being there, because I feel like
Oh yeah.
it's just always on his radar, even if he has a theme going on.
For sure. He's gonna draft the Zoomeril though instead this round, which Zoomeril's been seen less in this gen now that it's getting like Z Belly Drum anymore, but it's still one of the things you really have to respect when it's in front of you and in prep, because this is also one of those moments that you just can, like I like to say, you can misplay the entire game, do one turn wrong versus this Pokemon, and you can still lose. That's just how stupid a Zoomeril sometimes can be.
Yeah. it's
Okay.
It's hard.
Yes, then.
Okay, for me, I've drafted Azumarill once before, and I 100% put it in the same kind of similar category as Cinderace, where it didn't always have the best matchups, but if you just put a band on it, and it will be one of the most fun mons to use in a draft, one of the most fun mons that I've ever used in draft league format. Period.
And then for under the radar though, it's gonna pick up Nidoqueen. So again, get that ground type out of the way, get the toxic spikes, get the toxic spike remover. Not as offensive Nidoking, more bulky, we know the story. But I think this thing matches up also really well with his Rotom Heat that he like picked before here.
Yeah, and this gives him a really not a dedicated fairy killer for his team. Like I said earlier about like when Nidoking was paired with Hydreigon, it kind of goes in the same lines with Latios, especially when he got access to Baton Pass. He's running out of points very fast when he still has 5 picks to go, but thankfully when this still was one of his bigger investments, at least he covers 2 typings that he still needed to add. But interested to see how the rest of the job will go when he spent a lot of big shot of his points already, and most of them later on will be basically busted picks.
Yes, for sure. Then Ruto is gonna pick up the Zygarde 10% as his like ground and dragon type, which of course 1000 arrows move on its own. It's just so spammable, and that's the same attacks as the Zygarde 50% as well. It's just not as bulky.
Yeah, this one just felt like with the rest of my team, it really fit. Just having a mon that could reasonably just spam ground moves, and with the rest of my team kind of opening the door or like clearing the way for this mon to kind of do what he needs to do. Obviously this thing struggles with like grass types, and for that, like I have a Victini that can go around. I have certain things that I can do. I feel like if there was any team that could kind of open the doors that Zygarde needs for it to be opened, I feel like it was this kind of team.
Yeah, it could be cool there. Then D-Ray goes on and picks one of the better answers to Dracofish in Seismitoad. So not only does he now pair up, he still needs a fire type for his fire water grass core. Other than that, again, he does not have to deal with a Seismitoad whatsoever. Whether there's a Dracofish involved or not, it's just a very cool mon in general, which again, Infectus uses this thing a lot. Not necessarily recently, but more in Gen 7, right?
Good pairing with Otto, his hazard status that he already has, and this basically just takes out of Dracovish ever trying to be a bulky water for him. He doesn't have to do this. Just let Dracovish do Dracovish things and just go brrr on every single team that doesn't have water immunities. And Seismitoad is such a reliable mon. It's just so good what it does. Sure, it doesn't have reliable recovery, but it just needs to be around long enough just to do the certain things that it loves to do. It gets access to rocks, toxic, knockoff, scald. One of the best moves in the game in one mon. So it usually just does its job well.
I was really impressed. Dracovish goes, I can't do that.
Well, maybe you can explain the Delmise though that you picked up next.
The Delmise was a panic pick after Rotom was cruelly sniped from me. I needed a clearer that wasn't Tornadus. I needed a grass type. Delmise was the answer. I know literally nothing about how good Delmise is, so it's going to be a new experience for me. But it is 1,000 arrows resist, which I originally wasn't planning to have on my original plan, so I guess that's the plus side. It's also a spinner. I don't usually draft spinners that often. I usually draft defoggers. So, you know, it's something new. It's something a little slower. Outside of me and Xiao, I actually have perfectly spaced speed tiers, which is kind of nice. And yeah, I don't know. I think that it's going to be interesting to try. It gets a lot of cool tech, like Anchor Shot could make some fun shenanigans. It gets Iron Defense Body Rusted, which I didn't realize. Poltergeist could be really interesting to like identify items and just deal out huge amounts of damage. I don't know. I really don't know how to use it or build with it, but I'll be learning as the season goes on.
In general, Steelworker is just really fun in general to have like an extra stab, but not have the weaknesses of it. Like that's also something that that makes the thing fun to use. Then something interesting though, because Web just picks Goodra, and I don't know for how long, but ever since we started playing leagues, you have been hating on Goodra, or at least calling it overpriced a lot or overhyped. Is it just a better price, better fit on the team? Like, what's the reason we have Goodra suddenly here?
I'll still stand by what I've said in the past, because for the longest of time, it still, to me, was often overpriced. And it was tough for me to really convince myself picking it even at 120. But I really needed it, what it provides. It gives me a very strong fire answer on the special side, and my team was a little fire weak after my last two picks, and it gave me also Sap Zipper. And we see a Rillaboom over there. I needed something to be able to deal with that thing. I didn't want to necessarily put Big Volt necessarily always in that position. And it just, in that regard, made a lot of sense. And when I was planning my rest of the draft, the speed tier that it hit for me at base 80 was also crucial. So it fulfilled a lot of boxes. I'm gonna give it a shot. Maybe this season will kind of like give it a newfound respect to it. And that has kind of happened with me, and Rez is still in the BBR. So maybe Goodra will have his redemption arc with me here in UBL Season 6.
It could be fun, and Goodra has that for you, Heatran has that for me. Maybe we can make some fun stories with that going forward. Then we have someone that did want a switch in to Trick-a-Fish and was running out of points as well. So we have JV, who's going to pick up Arctozolt in round 6, which again, he already spent a lot of points. He needs to get his mons from somewhere now.
Arctovish, but yes,
Yeah,
it
Arctovish,
is.
yes.
It's okay, I think. I haven't been the most impressed by it. I used it once in one game, and I got swept by a Gorobus because I couldn't beat a Gorobus that was in front of this Arctovish. It's a long story, but I'm not the biggest fan of it defensively. I think its typing lets it down a little bit, but if he picks up a Hail Setter, then that adds a whole new dimension to his team that could be extremely valuable to him. One of the things I haven't said so far is I think that fire types could be somewhat of an issue against JB right now, and the fact that this water type doesn't resist fire doesn't exactly help him a ton, but if he brings hail, then it's sort of an offensive threat against fire types, which could be pretty important.
Yeah, but getting hail usually means another fire weakness, so that's something he also has to watch out for. But he could definitely
it's a double-edged sword. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Then for Incog though, they're gonna pick up Vileplume here in round 6. Again, the grass types are going fast. The one thing that I like Vileplume, but the one thing I don't like about it on this team specifically is that it's a grass type that does not resist ground when you have an Extra and a Volcanion.
Yeah, I mean, there's two flying types there, but I can see what you mean by it. I mean, Vileplume is literally my favorite Pokemon of all time, and I can still see that as sort of a valid criticism. I will say that Vileplume can be built so physically defensive that it does take on most grass types pretty well, or most ground types pretty well, but if it takes prior damage, it could be an issue. I do like it as a grounded poison here. It probably means that Incog won't be able to pick up a T-Spiker unless he picks up a non-poison T-Spiker or doubles up on poisons. But I mean, it's Vileplume. I love Vileplume. It's a nice Scald switch in too. That's not Volcanion as well, which seems kind of nice on a team with like extra.
Yeah, that's definitely cool though. That part is definitely appreciated. Then for mid though, he is going to pick up Miltank. Again, he has to dip into the lower tiers after picking 200 mons, but at least every mon he is probably like taking really close consideration, and the fighting weakness of Miltank doesn't really matter when you have a Slowking, when you have a Sylveon, even when you have a Salazzle that technically resists it. He gives himself a Cleric outside of Sylveon, which was already there, so he has 2 options to get rid of Skull Burns on his Melmetal. And in general, Miltank thick, Miltank annoying.
Yeah, and I think I love the fact that he kind of adds it as a physical side of resist to that fire typing and ice typing. I think that was probably one of the biggest deals for him, and it gives him a reliable rocker, so that Godson basically shouldn't be having to run rocks too often. So I think it just made a lot of sense. I think mid has made a lot of sense with his few picks, and I've been kind of digging what he's been trying to do. We're interested to see how he's gonna be try to get some ground immunities on the team. I think that's the one thing that is missing that at least bothers me still, but we have still way more picks to go.
For sure. One of which is going to be Landers Incarnate going to Q, and for me the thing with Landers Incarnate, which obviously it cannot run Sheer Force here, that's also why it went so late, but otherwise it would go much sooner and be a way higher price. For Landers Incarnate, is either you enjoy yourself with this mod and can get a lot out of it, or you don't and you really struggle using it. Like, this thing is really hit or miss for a lot of coaches.
Yeah, but I think the one big deal with picking it is that he has a Crash Research Rillaboom, and there aren't many ground types that tend to run special ground type moves like Earth Power as their primary stat. This thing happens to be running it quite often. Now, he can run Earthquake as well, and he might choose not to bring Rillaboom in certain matchup and catch their opponent off guard with it, but it's just a great mixed attacker in itself. It gets momentum as well, gives him a first stealth rocker on the team, and a nice speed here for below the Raikou in 101. And I think this is a very underrated offensive ground type that, while it's not as strong as a breaker as some of the other ones in its similar tier, it's still a very strong mon and tough to go up against, and it definitely have its matchups.
One thing I do want to say though is I also agree that Lando Incarnate is like extremely fantastic. My perception of it though in this pick is that I feel like it's having taken it on recently, I feel like it's so good, especially because it's sometimes very difficult to predict whether or not it's going to be going physical or special. So building your counter to like be either a physically defensive mon or especially defensive mon can be kind of tricky in prep. Having Grassy Surge kind of makes it a little bit more obvious that this thing's going to be running special a little bit more often, which could be a little bit of anti-synergy, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it's just a dope mon in itself.
Then moving on to the Wailords again, Irish, who's going to pick up Darmanitan, which honestly gives him a dedicated Scarf user if they wanted to, maybe taking that away from Hydreigon needing to do that, never having Nidoking to do that. It does get Trick, so it can trick away its Scarf if it wants to. Boots could make his thing probably last a bit longer, because that's the thing with Darmanitan. This thing is a glass cannon. Like, it is hard, not a lot of teams to switch-ins, but it dies really quick.
Thankfully, he at least has Tapu Koko on the team, so this thing will be luring bulky water types every single time. At least he has something that can come in on and take advantage of it, and try to put him or his opponents in a Volt Turn cycle. I think that's primarily what he's trying to aim to do with his first 2 picks, and now with Darmanitan. And then he has something like Nidoking to take advantage of it, but it will be forcing him to run Defog every now and then, unless he's willing to let this thing go down very easily with the Rocky Helmet chips, Stealth Rock Spin on the field, or Flare Blitz recall that he has to take. So hazard control will be more important for him as the trap goes along to be able to add on it.
For sure. Then speaking of hazard removal, I'm giving myself another one here. We're going to go with Tentacruel, which I know not a lot of people like Tentacruel. I do, I know Vepsis does. Even though it shares the ground weakness with Heatran, I think I have enough other ways of dealing with ground. Gives me some resistances, which I either needed to add or I wanted to not rely on just one specific mon to deal with it. And in general, it's a rapid spinner, it's a toxic spike absorber, a toxic spike setter, gets knockoff with a lot of water types, get that. And in general, it's a mon I enjoy using a lot.
Yeah, I think like typing wise it's phenomenal. Like it's always been a really solid typing itself. It's a water type that doesn't want to take on ground types, and that might be the only thing that you have to worry about is that it puts a lot of pressure on Mandibas. At least for now, until you're able to add more answers to ground type, since your grass type is also more of a utility, not necessarily like really bulky one in itself, but
It could be.
it does add a lot of tools that you wanted to add with what you already had on the team.
Oh yeah, I wasn't that worried with the ground when you have like Mandibas, Heracross, and Whimsicott. I think like the combination should be with it, but of course it has to come together in prep, which is the most important thing later on. The resists are there, but can we make it work in game? That's going to be the most crucial thing here. Then going back to Johnny, who is going to pick up Galvantula, which B tier wise sits between Zem and Lele, if I stand correct. Gives them sticky webs, gives them a Volt Switch, because they did not have too much momentum, at least this point, so they do add another one for that. And one of the Electric that can still hit ground types, which, just as your Vikavolt, is always useful.
Yeah. It gets webs. It's his first pivoter.
Second.
Crazy.
Hold on.
I guess
Gyarados.
teleport. Does Gyarados get flip turn now?
Yes, it does. I'm
Oh
pretty
my
sure
God.
Gyarados gets flip turn.
Wait, whoa.
I'm pretty sure it did get it in this DLC, unless I'm mistaken, but he does get it.
Thank you.
I don't remember that being a thing, so if it is, that's news for me.
Me too.
I may just
But
be
no-
fully off, but I remember it. I think it gets it.
But my first thought here is that with the inclusion of webs, and obviously that's not all that Galvantula does. I think Galvantula is a really solid mon on its own. But with the addition of webs, it enables a lot more specs and bans on a team that's already super supported by psychic terrain, and super supported by some crazy like Moxie sets that can snowball really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And one last point, it's because we're at like the halfway point in the draft. You notice that like most teams are through like 2/3 to like 3/4 of their points already. So getting these lower tier mons are going to be a bloodbath.
Mm-hmm. And then he's going to pick it up with Hitmonlee, because he still had Lele with terrain. He just didn't got the Olucia, but now he has another burden sweeper potentially, which of course not as good as Olucia is, but I can definitely still appreciate the Hitmonlee here.
Yeah, no, it's still definitely a threat in itself. Like, it's no joke with either Curse, White Herb, or Misty Seed in itself just to be able to immediately pop it some burden in itself. And it has good enough coverage to basically hit everything that it needs to. It's one of the hitmons that actually gets knockoff, it gets Poison Jab for berries, and it gets Stone Edge and Rock Slide for flying type. So it basically has the coverage that it needs. And it can be a solid like late game winning condition that he tries to use his other members of his team to be able to break those things down, like his psychic type core in itself. And now with Gyarados, with Hitmonlee, he has some tools to work for late game scenarios that he wants to try to accomplish in.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a super niche point, but Hitmonlee I believe already has a really strong special defense, and if it has a psychic seed, I can already imagine there's going to be some situation at some point in the season where because of the psychic seed, it takes a hit that it normally shouldn't take, and it just ends up again just snowballing to a win somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can definitely do that. Then going forward, I did not have a ground type yet. We already went over how important the ground types are, so I decided, you know what? Bottleswine's still sitting there in the mid tier. I used it before, and to good success. I'm comfortable building with this thing. And one good thing about Bottleswine though is that Bottleswine is actually a ground type that's not weak to ice. Which again is very useful considering I have like a Dragapult, a Mandibus, and a Whimsicott weak to ice, and I just don't want everything on Heatran. Tentacruel helps, but now I at least have added the typing and not increased my weaknesses, which is great.
Yeah, no, this is usually just a solid mod that often is also somewhat popular as well. So I would always imagine that whoever picks it, there's always gonna be someone that got sniped from it. Not necessarily saying I was, but like it's a very sought after mod and a very solid like mid-tier / lower tier ground type that just does its job well. It's not super offensive, but it's not passive either.
Yep.
Yeah, who doesn't love Pilot Swine?
Then for Irish, he is going to pick up Hitmontop, which has kind of seen the fall from grace after Gen 6. It does get triple axle now, I believe, so that's at least something it has going for it. But we just talked about removal and Darmanitan, so this may just be his immediate response of not having to run default Coco or Hydreigon, at least not as much.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest selling point for him to take this thing, that it's gonna allow him to plan out for the Darmanitan and be thinking like, okay, I need to get another remover. Hitmontop is probably gonna be there waiting for me, so let's grab it. And this is kind of where his team now, previous part, can fulfill their purpose a lot better in itself, so that his first 2 picks don't have to be that remover. And it's still a pretty solid mod. I don't like it when it's used defensively, so hopefully he can actually use those offensive sets with Technician Triple Axle and actually surprise opponents with it, how much damage it can do with that move in itself.
Yeah, Hitmontop definitely rewards creativity a lot, but with the overall team composition, it's tough imagining it not being a spinner most of the time.
For sure. Then the next mon, which I know a lot of people have mixed feelings on, but we have Galarian Persian here going to, or Alolan Persian rather, the Galarian is not a thing. Alolan Persian to Q and the Dragapults, which gives them yet another momentum user. And in general, I think they were in general just looking for a dark type to deal with. Like, they have covered their ground weakness by now. Like, we can establish that if you have Rillaboom, Moltres, Lando Eye, all these things, you deal with ground. It's just that they needed something for the other weakness of Slowking at this point, I believe, which was the bigger selling point for this pick.
Yeah, I think it's mainly that, well, looking at the points that they have left, it's just a dark type that he preferred from the ones that he was able to afford. And for his team, I think Parting Shot is somewhat nice for Raikou and Rillaboom. He doesn't have that like immediately really threatening setup sweeper, but it's not like completely useless with its support. But I think it's more so trying to just adding that dark type with the budget he has still left to work with.
Yeah, I really strongly dislike this mod. I drafted it once and I really disliked my time with it. But that said, I would have drafted it here if I didn't get stuck. If I didn't end up getting zeroed because of Serena, because it just fills a bunch of roles. That's it.
Then for Mid, who is going to pick up his ground resist, which we also briefly talked about, and they're going to pick up Tangela here, which people are mixed on Tangela too. It's really hard to break, but it's also really passive. So that seems to be something that Mid has to see what he wants to do with that with his team.
Yeah, and he provides himself a reach and core that isn't the one that people often really worries about at first, but it's definitely still not bad. And I think just adding just natural pure grass type that takes those ground type hits is something that, with the budget he has remaining, this probably was his best bet to get, other than Gourgeist. I would think is the only one that I would put him in the similar levels that what he can do in its role. Hidden Power being gone kind of sucks for it, but it still gets Sludge Bomb, it gets Knockoff, it gets Leechy, so it has some things to work with.
Yeah, very strong pick for him.
Then another interesting one is Regice going in round 7 to Incog, who, if you're comfortable with this thing, I mean, I've said this about a lot, but we have definitely seen people succeed with Regice in multiple ways. But we've also seen people fail who drafted it.
Yeah, this was definitely the one pick that, or not the one pick, but I'd say at this point in the draft, maybe this and Archivish were the 2 picks I was a little, not confused about, but I thought they were just early. for what they were. That being said, like Regice is cool. Like I like Regice as like a mon, and I think it can do stuff. I just think it's a little early for it.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone was taking it round 7. You know.
It's always when I face him more bulkier than I give it credit for some reason. Like I always think I deal with it naturally, and then I do my
200
cogs.
spit up. I mean.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Then I start doing cogs. Like, wait, why does my flamethrower not kill? What's going on?
That's the thing, we never really had to prepare for this mod because it was kind of like an odd mod, but now that heavy duty boots are a thing, a lot of monsters that used to be weak to rocks and were unviable almost because of that became viable. And Resi Ice is one of the million, well not a million exactly, but like a plethora of other monsters that became now viable, and Ice Resist was actually something that this team also could have had because the only thing I see is the Volcanion, so
Yeah,
having a
that's-
pure ice typing with such a high speed is useful for him.
For sure. Then, Lacevalon is gonna go to JV, so he's going to dip down again, or not dip down. Actually, he's going to go up after some lower spent points, but he is now below 200 as the very first coach to do so, and not even that much above 100 anymore. But this definitely does give him another late game cleaner, though.
Jay?
Decent call.
Yes.
Oh, hello.
He is.
You just picked Lacevalon.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you're almost broke.
Cephalon as like a, like you guys said, a late game breaker. Gives me 2 typings that I didn't have in Ghost and Fire, and like Ghost is very spammable, especially in like Draft League. Probably one of the better offensive typings. But yeah, and like if you're not too prepared for it, if everything is chipped down, then Beast Boost with Scarf just like cleans.
Only a bit low on the points right now, though.
I just learned that it got Rock Blast. I don't know why, but it got it this gen. And yeah, I'm confused. I don't know.
Oh yeah, that's the coverage that this thing needed.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, it's 127 attack. It's decent. Like, I don't know.
Then moving on.
Also, probably gets flip turn.
Then moving on to Vepsis, who's going to pick up the Drapion, which I think we've both actually used quite a lot here.
Yeah, this has been a more like every now and then I go back and be like, hey, I always liked you, let's have you on the board again. And it's just with 80 points, and like I said, when there was a Alolan person being picked, it wasn't actually a snipe pilot whatsoever, but it kind of encouraged me to grab my own dark type while I still could. And to me, point value wise, similar to Resi still at 80 points, I was like, you know what? It always does its job well. Stab knockoff, stab poison jab, giving me toxic spikes to be able to work with. It's just to fulfill so many roles with just 80 points, and I've been able to see more and more again, even in this generation, that it is still very viable mon and just something that I wanted to address on this team while I still could.
Can definitely see that. Then moving on to Aquarius, who is going to pick up Druddigon here. So more of a defensive type of dragon for this team. Usually, at least.
What? Yeah. I mean, so it was really weird, right? So I wanted a Ghost Resist, and I wanted a Hazard Setter. So I was like, let's go Miltank, right? And then Mid took Miltank. And I was like, that's really sad. So 2 snipes in a row, and I was basically just like scratching my head, and I was like, man, there's like no Hazard Setters, because I don't want like my rocks to be exclusively Mamo and Rachi, because they want to do other things. So I was like really searching, and I was struggling, and like I went on for like hours trying to find some. Totally forgot that Druddigon got rocks, because I was just rushing over all the non-ground steel ones, and it sort of just perfectly fit. It gives me glare support for things like Mamoswine and Jirachi, sadly, but it's something I've had like a weird experience using. I've only used it a few times in the past, and every time I've used it, it's always been like Life Orb Sheer Force, which is like not how most people use it. So I'm gonna try and use it a little bit more versatilely with glare and a little bit more defensive rough skin options, or like but also I do have experience using it offensively as well, pretty effectively. So I think I can use it kind of versatilely, and I'm excited to try it out.
Yeah, the only thing that I was gonna say was glare all the things for me.
It's glare.
Yeah.
Then for Dracofish and Friends, let's see what new friend is going to be added here. The friend's going to be Zoroark, which is another dark type going here, which
Gross.
very different from most dark types though that we have seen going so far.
You disguise yourself as Dracovish, and then the Dracovish answer comes out, and then you kill the Dracovish answer, and then Goth can kill the second best Dracovish answer. Then what stops the Dracovish? It's horrible. It's
This is
terrifying.
Dracovish and friends, like he gets to slap a Dracovish, all parties in the background, like, hey, this is our secret, buddy.
No,
Like,
this is disgusting. Oh my god.
I'm impressed by D-Ray. This is probably my favorite draft I've seen him drafting. I haven't known him for too long, but the time that I've been able to know him, this is probably my favorite draft for him, and I'm hate to prepare for it one of these days.
Just
It's just mind games. So many mind games. It's horrible.
Then going to Root, who had Diva before on his Rotom, but a spinner on top of it's probably nice too, which is probably why Sandslash is here. And no ground type yet as well.
Yeah. I think Sandslash is great. I've drafted it a couple times. I have enjoyed using it every time that I've used it, and I literally just learned, and I probably should have known this, but I had no idea that it got Super Fang until like this week, and it sucks because like Super Fang Nidoqueen is like one of my favorite Nidoqueen sets, and I feel like it just opens up so much for what Sandslash can do. I think Sandslash is super underrated. Like I said, I've just enjoyed using it every time that I've had it.
Yeah, and again, people need to think about their points, because if you can see across the board, people are getting low on their points, so that's something to, like, barring Dr. Slacking, like, he is at 360, but we'll see what he does after this. First off, we have Under the Radar, who's going to pick up Rhydon. Did not have a ground type yet. Adds a Stealth Rocker, which takes pressure away from Nidoqueen. And in general, people need to think about their points. We already went over Under the Radar spending a lot of points until now, so in that sense, the Rhydon definitely fits into the team here and his budget, which is probably the most important part.
I think it's more so like what I see what it
he did have a ground meter.
I guess I'll finish my presenting. Like, my only thought on this is, like, typing wise, that I think that this adds, while he already had the Nidoqueen, the rock typing adds him as secondary flying resist, since he's still type. It doesn't resist that.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, yeah, even though Nidoqueen is another ground, he's doubling on grounds here. I don't think outside of, like, well, they obviously do share weaknesses, but, like, electric types are gonna have to run, like, both Grass Knot and, like, if they have a coverage for Nidoqueen, like, I'm thinking about stuff like Zero Aura and how it's going to deal with stuff like this. Like, Grass Knot isn't going to be able to, like, beat the Nidoqueen, but it will be able to beat the Rhydon. It just forces different amounts of coverage, given they're different enough ground types, and one's more special, one's more physical. I think they're different enough to be both threats on their own on this team.
Then, moving on, we have Kangaskhan. So, even though that Dr. Slacking has the most points left, he is refusing to spend them, so he probably has one of those higher tier mons that no one else can really pick anymore in mind, and he's just gonna wait it out. He's gonna wait it out and knows that no one can touch it, so he is just going for the Kangaskhan here, which is a really reliable normal type. It would not have been my first choice for the lower tier normal types, but I know Vebs is probably disagreeing that this can definitely be better than an Audino or Licky at least.
I think it comes to preference of using it in the end. Like, I think the one thing that I guess the Licky, for example, would have been better is that it would have been also cleric for him, but Kangaskhan is very solid in its own right. Like, you can make it bulky, but it can be offensive, and it has a better speed tier to work with base 90 in itself, and it has good priority, it has scrappy as well, so it doesn't have to put coverage to hit a ghost type. It can just body slam and paralyze them instead. So all it really needs to worry about is like rock types and steel types, which normal types already get a coverage for, like fighting moves or ground type moves. So I think Kangaskhan is pretty solid in its own right. It's just a matter of preference in the end and fit.
Then, since we're heading,
I think Matt also preferred. I was just gonna say, I think Matt was gonna prefer Licky, but I think he was only picking OU and UU mons in Gen 4, so he wasn't able to, sadly.
That's okay. That could be why. Since we're now at the point where we are at the later points where people have less points to spend, mons are typically less important. Gonna be going a bit faster over these also for time's sake. So we're gonna do these back to back. We're gonna have Ultra Player here who's gonna pick up Mesprit and Selgar. which, looking at his budget, still hurts him a little bit because now he has 120 points for his final picks, which is definitely possible, but you have to watch out a little bit there. Another ground immunity with Mesprit, of course offensive Psychic is really good about it, and more speed and more hazard stacking with Acelgar. I think those are the main takeaways here for why he did this.
Yeah, I think Mesprit is one of the most Ultra Player mons. I think when I think of Ultra Player, Mesprit has to be like one of the top 5 mons that just comes to mind. He loves that thing.
Then for Dr. Slacking Blaziken, who now has U-Turn, who got close combat as well, but it only had high jump kick first, right? Now has CC as well. Or am I mistaken? Again.
I'm pretty sure it's that it just now got close combat and Aura Sphere, and now it also got access to U-Turn. Like, those are like the big new toys that it got.
And for the price you pay, he did not have a fire type yet, and if you want to go with the theme, then I guess this one makes sense. Then for Underrated Spirit Tomb, probably same story as we said before. People need to figure out their dark types, which they didn't have so far. May not be the best, especially with Pursuit being gone, but given his budget, and still, like, you need a dark type. You just don't want people to just click Ghost for free against you.
Yeah, Ghost or
I mean, that's the issue with Spiritomb, though, is that it doesn't resist Ghost, and he doesn't have a Ghost resist yet, so maybe it wasn't the best dark type, but I mean, it's still dark.
Yeah, it worked for Psychic, but yeah, he still has to watch out for that. Then for Root, Cragonal, another low tier spinner, and something above 100 speed again.
Yeah. It felt like it takes a lot for me. I feel like my special offense is lacking a little bit. It kind of equalizes that a little bit, and just offensive ice seem like it could be really fun in certain matchups. It obviously can spin, knock off. It can do certain things, but for the price, it definitely seemed like it fit here.
Then for the Dracofish and friends, we have Caparaja. So what does Caparaja offer for our boy Dracofish here?
I guess
Stealth rocks. I guess another one besides that.
Additional fairy killer, what I could tell. That's probably it.
I just love how we analyze this team as how does it help Dracofish, not what does it do for the team, how does it help Dracofish.
Team is Dracofish.
The team is basically Dracofish, but like outside of that, like Steel Touch went early on, and this rack was one of the better ones from like middle to / lower tier price category. Like it was either this or Steelix that I would have seen him picking as a key Steel type.
And just super quickly, Caparaja is just another super duper fun one.
And a fish want an elephant friend, according to D-Ray. That's fair too. Now for Aquarius, Skuntank, which, I mean, well, there's another dark type. They're really going fast. And round of poison.
That's the dark type, yeah. It gives me a defogger, because I really only had Torn and Delmies, and I like my hazard clears. Gives me a grounded poison, gives me a dark, checks all those boxes while not overblowing my budget. Priority and Sucker Punch is pretty neat. And it got like some pretty cool tech in Gen 8. It gets corrosive gas, even though it doesn't get knockoff. It does get options to item removal. It has the move slots to use it. Got access to player up, I think, this gen, so it can hit other dark types. Doesn't have the greatest stats, but its typing and its sort of support options make up for it, in my opinion.
Then for Vepsis, we have Talonflame, which the one time I got to use it in this gen, I really, really like Talonflame. But you probably most needed it for your speed, I assume, at this point.
Yeah, it was like I was looking at the elite speed tier mons. There were few on the board. This is the one that I felt like was the best fit. Like it was this or Barraskewda. Barraskewda was a little bit more expensive. And when I'm planning out my draft, Talonflame fit into the basket. And it gave me a fire type that, from the ones that were left, I prefer it the most.
Yeah. Honestly, Talonflame felt like one of the least Vepsis mons left on the board. But hey, if it can learn rest, Vepsis will have it, I guess.
Exactly.
Then for JV, his dark type, Vullaby, which I think Vepsis has pretty strong opinions about Vullaby as your dark type.
Yeah, it's not the ideal one, but it's, if you go really on a budget, this is usually the good first one that people pick, and there's a reason for it. Like, if you have to budget on 20 points on your dark type, which is not something I would recommend, But if you do, Volop is probably usually the best bet. It's like with Eviolite, it's still really bulky, like its big sister Mandibus in itself. It just hurts that it kind of has to run that Eviolite to have that bulk, and you don't have the option of running heavy duty boost to nullify the stealth rock weakness.
Then for Inkunk, we have Polisand here, which gives him a secondary ground typing. It does give him the ghost typing, and even though it's not the most offensive ghost type, this thing can still do work. Other than that, do people see a very glaring reason here for the...
I mean, Shore Up gets boosted to 66% in the sand.
Listen,
That's something kind of cool.
All
I'm
right.
just saying, killing that thing in sand is really, really rough. And during this round, and during the other rounds, I saw dark types go, and I said, well, my team isn't going to really do much against dark types at this point, because my plan is just to avoid you. So,
Sure up.
that's all I got.
That works. Then for mid, they're gonna draft another Rotom form in Rotom Fan here, so 2 ground immunities back to back, which are not 2 ground resistant immunity, which we were asking for kind of for them doing.
That was a snipe of me as well. Took Miltank. It's a great mon. It's my favorite mon to use in Draft League, purely just because its dual stab is impeccable. It usually comes at a pretty low price, which is really great. I think it was 40 here, which I
40.
think is insane value for it. It can defog. It's a great speed tier. It can break with Nasty Plot. It can status spread. Whenever I draft it, I usually bring it to like at least 75% of my games, and it's impeccable. So I think Min's gonna like it a lot.
Then for Q, they're gonna draft Avalok here, which probably is indeed for the removal. They have Defog Finny, Defog on Thunder, Landorus. Yeah, I'm not sure why I couldn't call the right one, and Moltres, but those are all mons. Like, do you really want to fit it on? As where Avalok probably runs it a little bit more easy at that point.
The other part about getting a spinner here rather than a defogger is he wants to keep his terrain intact. So having a spinner as a hazard remover is definitely something that's important to look towards.
Yeah, and Q mentioned that if he didn't get Paragon, he was going to get Avalug, so that's what we're going to do.
Well, there you go.
It is.
Then for Irish Emerald Scyther, who obviously got a massive buff with dual wing beat. Still a bit of a struggle with Eviolite first heavy duty boots we talked about with Volibee before. Although this one probably leans a little bit more to just heavy duty boots and run a bit more offensive. With dual wing beat, which again, Technician dual wing beat stab hits pretty hard from this thing.
Yeah, it's still, like, it's been a month that ever since it got that, it was really hyped and people were really excited for it. I haven't yet seen it too much in action, so hopefully during the season Irish Emerald ends up actually using it, and at least I get a better feel of it, how good it is in draft. Because I'm gonna be blankly honest, I'm not still sure if I fully buy into the hype that it's gotten thus far.
I feel like it has a lot of potential. I'm just waiting for my opportunity to use it.
Then for me, another Speedy Mon Special Breaker Inteleon is gonna be added here. Mainly for those 2 reasons. Again, another speed tier higher. Which, if people think, hey, maybe it doesn't bring Whimsicott, well, you need to now make a call. I'm not bringing both of them. And having another water, like dual water, is not uncommon. Mainly a special breaker though. That's what I was really like, a dedicated special breaker, which I think Vebs has used it mainly in this sense as well, like fast mon with like good special attack.
Yeah, it was mainly like one of those base 100 fast mons, like similar to what I took Talonflame mod. It was basically this Inteleon Barraskewda on my list. I wasn't going to pick this thing again because I've used it a lot, but it's like it's good what it does. You just have to make sure that you have answered the bulky water Scott. It basically cannot touch them unless one of its coverage move happen to be super effective, but most of the time it just doesn't touch them, so that's one thing that you have to just look after it.
Yeah, well, luckily we can U-turn into that Whimsicott there. Then for the next pick from the Douglas, I'm just going to pair them all together because this was a wheel pick. They pick Garbodor and Armaldo back to back, which so that means they have a grounded poison type, they have toxic spikes, they have another stealth rocker in Armaldo, a spinner, I guess. I know not everyone likes Armaldo all too much, I think the main thing people will like about this wheel is the Garbodor, but Armaldo has his
I
moments.
think it's clear he's taking what he can get. I mean, Hitmonlee's the only spinner, and if it's giving an unburdened abuser, it's not going to be spinning too often. So if it's a low tier spinner on the board, it makes sense to take it. Yeah.
He just literally meant like to the garbage bin shopping spree to find whatever he could find. He found a Garbodor from there, funnily enough, and he found Armaldo just to fulfill a few roles. And that's pretty much it. Armaldo is something that I'm more hesitant of thinking like how good it can be. Garbodor, on the other hand, I think is pretty solid. It gives you a nice hazard stacking core with Ferrothorn.
Yeah, and Poison's a super underrated defensive typing, and when it does have its matchups, I feel like Garbodor's gonna have some great moments.
Then for me, Electivire is next up. Same as what I said with Whimsicott, the speed tier of this thing was needed because I do have Tentacruel around 100, but that's a Tentacruel. Like, people are gonna predict me not to run speed on that, at least sometimes. And Electivire just again forces natures for me. And something else which some people really don't sleep on, at least what I've noticed, is that having a Volt Switch blocker that's not a ground type can sometimes be really beneficial if you look at things like Rotom-Mow and other things with coverage that can hit them. And you need to be comfortable with Electivire. So far I have been, so we're gonna see what it can do for me again in this this season.
With that statement too, because the motor drive can really basically set up the game for Electivire to start claiming kills, because that speed tier is really, really important. That's why I didn't like it at first, but then I was like, oh, if you get a boost, the game can be very much broken open with Electivire, which is not something I thought I'd be saying in Gen 8.
Yeah, people underestimate how high its actual attack stat is. Like, some people think it's really low, but it actually isn't. Then for one of the more crazier picks here, I think this is going to be the only time where a Levion goes and 3 people get sniped on a damn Levion.
It's a good mon.
It is, but why did 3 people get sniped on it?
Well, because they got sniped.
Because the grass type.
The next one to go after from multiple people apparently, and when we look at the basic category, people don't have too much points to spend on with. I'm decent at 160, but they're like majority of them are like starting to get below of that in itself.
Remind me who was after it? Remind me.
Who are all after?
I don't remember. Who doesn't have the grass?
I remember 3 people being upset in the chat after this happened.
I know D-Ray was upset because of Wish Cleric uses, and then also like you can use it as a baton pass. Funny story, just baton pass early and just get out.
I think Skyrander wanted it too, but that was
could be true, and then someone else, which we don't remember right now, but
maybe.
Definitely a lot of snipes here. Then for Q, Frostlass, they're gonna go dual Ice, but this thing is actually a really good offensive tool, both from Ice Step and Ghost Step. I think a lot of people actually sleep on how good this thing can be offensively.
Well, it just got better because of its new tools in Triple Axle and Poltergeist. So even though it has equal special attack, special and physical attack stats, most people are running special if they were running an offensive set before this generation. Now with the addition of boots and the fact that it has physical moves that are arguably stronger than its special alternatives, it's a lot more unpredictable of a mon, and a much bigger threat now.
Yeah, and then for Myth, Dark types, which something he did not have, so he's gonna pick up Scrafty here. I guess he also didn't have a fighting type yet, so that works well. I think he was one of the only teams at this point, as I look over them quickly, without a Dark type still.
Yeah, one of the few besides the one that is right after him, what I can quickly clear on, and maybe that was one of the biggest reasons why he still had to take it right now. And then there's also Ultra Play on the wheel, but that I believe also doesn't have Dark, so based on that, I can kind of see why he had to jump on it still already at this point, even though majority of people already had their Dark.
It's a good round 9 though.
People tend to like.
Yeah, and it's a good round 9. Like, usually this might sometimes not be around this point anymore. Then for Inkop, we have Slurpuff here, which does give sticky webs, does give multiple setup options.
Alright, so
I love
basically,
Slurpuff.
I was like, I've never used this Pokemon in Draft League format ever once. Everybody else who has had rather good enough success. So I wanted a really good fairy type that could both be physically offensive and specially offensive, and additionally, it could be a cleric. And that's a lot of roles that I needed low-key, because like, sure, Togekiss could be a cleric, but like, if you know, you know. I'm not gonna be doing too much with Togekiss unless like I really need defog during that week. And in general, I really do like this Pokemon a lot. So I was like, why not see how it does in Draft League format? And I really Belly Drum, Calm Mind, right up my alleyway.
Then for JV, they're gonna pick Claydol, which gives them another remover. Aside like Corviknight and Vullaby. Ground immunity, which I mean for the is JV still around here? Because I'm not always looking at who leaves and who joins.
But it gives them a ground type, which obviously is important.
Which obviously is important to you. Not the best one here, but it's a ground type. Probably a better ground type here. It goes to Vapsus with go with this thing here, the Golurk. But I think you mainly direct this for offensive Ghost.
Yeah, I wanted it to be that offensive Ghost type, and like Poltergeist coming out of this thing is like menace, man. I have this also in APA Academy as well, and I've been itching of trying this out in this generation. Like I have seen and heard how people are really struggling to find a switching on it. They're like, okay, I can handle all of these other things. I'm still really weak to Golurk. Please do not bring that thing. That's basically what I hear a lot of people when they're preparing for this one, and now I'm gonna be like, well, I'm gonna make the whole UBL sweating about the Golurk if they have to prepare for this and all the other things I have. So it doesn't necessarily add me anything regards to being a ground type, but I just wanted to use it as an offensive Ghost, and just having a Poltergeist on this thing looks really fun.
It adds a whole Trick Room dimension as well with Trick Room Teleport as well. I like that.
And then for our players, we have Type Null, one of the more reliable bulky normal types down below there. Even though you do need rest talk if you want to keep it healthy, that's a bit of a downside.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I guess it does. I don't know. Maybe it needs. I don't know. That's something that's probably best to ask Elias. But I honestly just didn't. Skuntank I still like, but I think I need a little bit more reliable of a Ghost type switch and still at the same time, specifically a Dragapult Lancer. So I mean, like, I'm just trying to fill that check mark a little bit. Slow Pivoter also helps out a lot of my super offensive high tier ones.
Yeah, for sure. Then the new friend for Dracofish is going to be Hitmonchan, because I guess this team wanted more removal outside of Zapdos. Maybe does Rebomb get defog by now? Like all their favorites?
Like,
yeah, but again, that's not ideal.
Yeah, you rather have a spinner for that role, and there weren't many spinners that were in the first place left, and also that he could afford in itself, and he also liked the fighting type in as well from his draft. So fulfill a couple of boxes that he's trying to fulfill with his last few points that he has still to spend for these final 2 rounds.
And then for Root, we have Pinsir, which I've seen more people actually saying Pinsir kind of nice. I get to see it do a whole lot, but tell me about Pinsir.
Yeah, no. Can we talk about Pinsir for a second? For just this thing is 20 points, right? This thing is 20 points, and this thing can set up rocks. It's like the perfect speed for a Scarf. It gets more than enough coverage than it needs. I mean, between Stone Edge, Close Combat, and Bug Stab, it can deal with most of the matchups. Like obviously, it's not going to come to half the matchups or maybe even most of the matchups, but the matchups where it does have solid coverage, I feel like this can really shine and do a lot of what it needs to do. I think if anything, if this thing got taunt, I think it'd be like the perfect 20-point mon.
Let's still can do some other things here. Then for Under the Radar, they're going to pick up AutoMatthic for some wish support around their team. By the looks of it, they also did not have a fairy yet, so they're probably kind of lucky that they were able to secure AutoMatthic round 9.
Yeah, he actually likes like clerics and wish passes quite a bit, and from those what I have seen, usually him playing around with like in his streams and making different kind of drafts teams. It's usually AutoMatthic or Licky that he always plays around with, and AutoMatthic end up being his move of choice. just to cover the fairy typing.
Mm-hmm. And then for, well, I guess the Snowfire team is going to pick up the big bro here with Obama Snow. Does give them Auroraville though, which could be fun to play around, even though they're not like, as if Azumarill not too setup heavy, but Azumarill behind Veil could definitely be really annoying to deal with.
I agree with that. I think that Azumarill is probably in a really good hands with being behind Auroraville, and additionally, like having that ability to set it up for different mods, even like the Latias, the Tyranitar, if you will, even like to that extent, just like the Flygon. Like there's a lot of Pokemon that will definitely appreciate being behind Auroraville, and Abomasnow will definitely get its niche use out of this team.
Mm-hmm. Then for the final wheel for Ultra Play here with Sandaconda, so they're gonna get a ground type, which they didn't have yet, and they're also picking up Guslord as their dark type.
Guslord is the greatest dark dragon type in the entire game, without a question. It is spectacular. Ultra Player has basically already won the league.
I wanna vomit. That's all I can say about this. But like, as Sandaconda at least gives him a second rocker that we kind of skipped on last wheel in itself. That Mesprit was actually his first rocker of the draft.
Yeah.
Now with Sandaconda he kind of covered. The rocker base is a little bit better, and Guslord, I guess it's a dark type. I guess it's a dragon that he didn't have. So in that we kind of fulfilled that box.
It's great. It's
And,
amazing. Take my word for it.
And one more time with the Sandaconda pick, glare all the things.
Glare all the things. Next up, though, we have the Snowfire again with Dr. Slacking, who's going to pick up Dusknoir. So, I think probably same boat as the Golurk. Just have something like an offensive ghost type. Because this thing gets Poltergeist as well, which actually is a game changer for this thing.
Yeah, I was talking to Matt about this pick before he made it, and he was sort of between this and a few other options, and I think Dusknoir was the best choice for him here. Because it gives him a ghost type, like you said, it gives him a little bit of priority as well, which he does have in some of his later picks, but just another one couldn't hurt. But I think the other thing that I really like about it is it gives him Trick Room support, which actually a lot of his team sort of looks like it could thrive under. So that was sort of the other thing that I thought looked pretty nice on top of the Poltergeist stuff.
This thing comes to 2 matches at most.
Then for Under the Radar, he has to pick a 20.1. He's going to go into Pikachu, so... we see Pikachu actually go again. The last time this happened was, I think, Uzi Gunner, who went ahead and won the league with a Pikachu. He picked it round 1 though, so maybe that was the difference. But so far Pikachu has, I think, only been used once, and it became champion, so maybe something is in the making here.
Goatmon.
It surprisingly hits hard for what you would predict, but yeah, it's a Pikachu. Then, moving on to Root Duraludon. Because you're already a Steel type, but you did not have a Dragon type, for what it seems like.
I did have Zygarde.
Zygarde, yeah. Zygarde's there. I just... every time I see that, I just look at it like, oh, Thousand Arrows. I don't even look further than that.
Right. And that's more or less the point, right? Like, this adds a ton of versatility for my team. I think... First and foremost, like any mons this generation that have both Iron Defense and Body Press are fantastic immediately, and I really needed to kind of balance out more this balance between, you know, physical and special. That was one of my reasons for going for Cragganol over the Frostlass, and this thing just kind of can pressure fairies. It can pressure a lot of things that I kind of needed to pressure here, and with rocks and with Draco and things like that, I just think it fit really well here.
Yeah, and at least you have like a Steel type instead of Steel already, so this does not have to be your dedicated defensive Steel type sometimes. Which
right.
I think is something people try to do with the Duraludon, but make it more struggle than do well with it. Then another friend for Dracofish here is actually gonna be Twacky.
This is an interesting pick, but I definitely can feel like it's a good pick. It's just, man, Thwacky's an interesting Pokemon.
Yeah,
I love
it.
it.
Probably had to do with his grass type being Roserade, which does not resist ground, so the terrain helps with that. Something along those lines, probably what we're going for. But moving on with Aquarius here, Magneton, so Trapper, like the lower tier Trapper.
I looked at my team at this point in the draft. I said there are 3 Mons I lose to in particular. Those Mons are Celesteela, Skarmory, and Corviknight. So, Magneton's the answer. I usually feel like I need at least one of a fire type and an electric type in order to break those Mons in particular in any draft league. I didn't have either a fire or an electric. I decided that I would just go all in on defeating those Mons with a Magneton, at least forcing prep in some way. And it was originally just for those 3, but I talked to Dr. Slacken a little bit before I made the pick, and he kind of convinced me that it had a little bit even more utility outside of just trapping. I think analytic and doing some calcs on top of that. Magneton's an insane offensive threat as well. So I'm excited to try it out.
Yeah, it
What's
could be.
Celesteela
Only
ever
losing
done
out
to
on
you?
hidden power hurt it a little bit here this gen.
Yeah, and the fact that it also doesn't get body press compared to its
Yeah,
big
it's
brother
Magneton,
Magneton,
yeah.
it's also a small hindrance, but otherwise it's fine what it does.
It's pretty good, yeah.
Yes, then moving on to Websis with the best fairy in the entire existence in Wigglytuff.
What is a Dragapult to a Wendy, man? Like, I love my
Set of fodder.
Wigglytuff. At 40 points provides me Ghost and Dark resistance that I really needed on this team. And I lacked a Fairy type on a team, and my normal type prior to this was Pete, my Porygon Seed, which is not known to be such a bulky normal. So it kind of fulfilled those boxes in itself, and I love that it gives me Stealth Cox, it gives me Teleport, and it gets a great coverage in itself. And so it just fits so many little niches roles that I wanted to have on it. Also, I want to mention, not a big deal, but I was spoiled that my last pick is an 80 pointer. So the layout is a little bit mistaken. I don't know how
It
much
might be a
there
little.
are, but just for others to know, 80 pointer is still coming in from my end.
Oh yeah, like the first half of the draft when I was making the slides was actually using a calculator, and at the final round I stopped, so maybe this was one of the mistakes I made here. But then we have the power pick here, we have Sheep, we have Dubwool who goes to JV.
God,
You know,
stupid
Cotton
sheep.
Cotton Guard
Double's
body press.
fantastic. I love Double.
Does it do anything?
Like it has no
Cotton
coverage.
guards
It
and
has
sits
no
in front of your
coverage.
team and calls you a bitch.
Yeah, it's
That's
just-
all it does. It has a good speed tier. It has good enough, like, you know, has alright move choices, I guess. And then body press Cotton Guard can be bad against people because some people don't have that, like, fighting resist or immunity.
Does Fluffy boost body press damage or no?
No, thankfully.
No.
Okay, that would be kind of nuts.
Just
yeah.
mention Double to Ultra Player. He loves talking about it.
Then for the next one, we have another normal type though. We have Inkhawk with the Stoutland, so that's a secondary Sand Sweeper here.
Alright. I didn't want to pick this originally, but my front office was like, hey, what happens if X-Drill dies? And I'm like, Stoutland sucks. It doesn't even get Earthquake, let alone, it doesn't get a lot of things. But then I started looking at it and I was like, alright, I can make this make do. Because the funniest part about Stoutland is that it can be a very, very, very dangerous revenge killer with scrappy retaliate against a lot of ghost types that will think that they're safe. And I don't always have to run Sand Rush. In addition, Intimidate's really good for this Pokemon at least. Like Assault Vested, Intimidate, Stoutland can actually do a pretty fair amount of support if I needed to.
Then for mid, we have Comfy joining him in here. So secondary Fairy type along with Sylveon. To take some pressure off, Calm Mind setup shenanigans, Cleric, Triage stuff. Pretty straightforward. I'm not sure if we will see Sylveon plus Comfy. But it could still work out for his team here.
I think it's there to add priority that he barely has any of, and also having
Fighting resist.
remover option as well. Because other than the Rotom, he doesn't have a single remover. So I think Defog may have been a big reason why he took this. Just to have another remover option and not be forced to run heavy duty boots on everything.
Then for Q, we have Berserker here, which we don't see that often, but I had to actually face it a few times and prep for it and do cogs, and this thing actually hits insanely hard.
Yes,
Such an
it
underrated
does-
pick.
He
Well,
has the
again, he-
catch though. We gotta have to recognize that. He has the Alolan person and the person.
Yeah, I just realized that.
Yeah. Well, he's allowed to, so.
That made me fan of the pick alone. Didn't really
Alright.
care otherwise.
He has both cats, so he's invested in that. Then Irish here with the Licky Licky. which probably, like I said, another rider could have picked it. He went for the Aromatisse, then Irish went for the Licky here. Pretty straightforward. Like it's a cleric, which again is useful for his team. He may need to watch out with Flame Body, Melodic plus cleric, but he was probably more looking at like Wish and not have to rely on Leafeon for that. Especially given like you need to keep the Bronzong healthy for the most part on this team.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, and just in general, bulky normal types were going like surprisingly enough. This last is the longest when you consider all the other normal types that were picked before it.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna continue the trend with Autono here. So basically the discount, it can be taunted. It's a little bit less bulky, but it has regen, so at least it has something else. But yeah, I'm basically doing it for the same reasons Irish is doing this, so not too much of a different discussion here. I see I forgot to change the Autono picture here, but Charizard is going to the Douglets, and it's going to be joined by Eldegoss, and that's going to be the entire team for the Douglets.
Is that new Charizard form? The Audino form? Yeah.
No.
We have
just like Charizard is same as what I said about some other mons, really hit or miss. If you're comfortable and you put boots on this thing, it can actually be doing really good damage. Eldegoss whatsoever, I'm not a big believer of Eldegoss. Some people used to say Eldegoss is the example that a regenerator alone cannot make a Pokemon good. It made the coverage that Eldegoss likes.
I'm kind of the unpopular opinion that it's good.
I like it because I drafted it before, but like on that team specifically, you already have a much superior Grass in Ferrothorn, and for what it's worth, I don't think like a Rapid Spinner, you have Hitmontop or even Armaldo. You want to talk about Grass, Ferrothorn. You want like All-In Post Support, I guess, or Aromatherapy, whatever you want. Like you have other Pokemon that can do it, so I don't know if it's like the best pick, but it could be a niche Grass type.
I think most of why I don't like it on the team, even if there wasn't a Ferrothorn, but because it's already there, is that the fire resistance aren't ideal. Make all of them work on the same draft.
I'd say it's 1,000 arrows resist, but Sagard is banned, so I'm a little bit less impressed.
Yeah, it's like a 10%, but that's about it. That's the one thing that was now. For me, 20 points. You know what I'm gonna do with 20 points? You have the trappage. That's how we're gonna finish up my side. Hey, every time I bring it, it does work. A few times I bring it, has to say. But hey, if it's for some prep, could be fun to see some people bring some shed shells again against me. Then for Irish, he was gonna go with Glalie, which we have to Moody's banned before people start thinking that shenanigans going on here. Probably for him just for typing's sake, I would say, right?
Spike stacking.
Yeah, spikes are probably the only thing. Like, why would you ever draft Glalie if you didn't get spikes?
Yeah,
like, I think that's the only little glance of hope you give it that, hey, you could do something.
Maybe.
Without moving.
Yeah, and when the draft was happening, it kind of struck me like obviously like Ice gets memed on a lot, but a surprising number of Ice types went in the last like a handful of rounds of the draft. It was pretty wild to me.
Then a Pokemon that can actually do stuff that goes in the final round is going to be Noivern for 100 points to Q, which I'm surprised Noivern made it all the way to round 11, as this is one of the better performing mid-tier mons.
People leave it on the last round. Like, come on, people, respect the Noivern. It's a really good mon.
I mean, I had Dragonflip, I had no reason to pick it, but other people, shame on you. Then for mid, he's gonna I think there was a calculation error here too, because Charger Buck is definitely not 40 points, it's 20. So I probably messed that one up somewhere down the line. But yeah, he's gonna finish the draft off a Charger Buck here, which I guess Sticky Webs is the main lure here.
Yeah, it's just one of those cases where I got 20 points how we have it in UBL, is that it's tough to find anything there that provides anything for you in itself or forces prep. And like trapping and sticky webs are usually the big things that people are like, okay, well, these at least for something or provide a tool for me to utilize. And so it's a boss, or how I like to call it, a straight up boss. That's basically what it's going to be doing for the team.
Then for Inkok, he will be finishing off with regular Rodon. Now, and again, this probably what Noivern is, another mod that can actually do something here, as Ghost is really spammable.
It Volt turn, like I have like some U-turners, I have Volt switch and everything, but I didn't have an electric type. Personally, I wish I had got one earlier, like very much earlier. And it also provides defog, and also just like other Rotom forms, it could status everywhere. The only issue is that it's a ghost type, and when I looked at my team back, I was like, you know, dark types with some coverage beat my team up a little bit too much, so definitely was not my best pick, but I definitely think that I still want to use it. I still want to experiment with it too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that you may end up like fixing in free agency, but like Rotom might be something that you wanna keep around, because I do think for my lower tier electric types it was probably your best bet for what we're left.
Yep. Then for JV, his final mon is gonna be Auroras, which we talked about this before. There are lower tier hail setters. This one also gets Auroraville now, so it could enable that. So we called again that Octafish to do some things.
Slush Rush.
Yeah, Slush Rush, yeah. Then for Vepsis, Virizion is your final pick here.
Yeah, it provides me another mon about base 100 other than Talonflame. Provides 2 typings that I was lacking, and it gives me that justified mon just to be able to deter dark type moves to be utilized when I have Golurk, I have Slowbro, and I have there was something else. But basically for those 2 being weak to dark, I wanted to make sure that I have some sort of way of using it. I'm not being the biggest fan of using it in previous gens, but I'm willing to give it a go and might be part of that redemption arc with Gudrat, and I start to liking them more, and I think it's just had a good fit on the team.
Rion's not getting redeemed, my guy.
Then the final pick for Aquarius is Palpitoad, which
Don't
second,
laugh.
second
Absolutely.
pick.
Don't laugh. Palpitoad's spectacular. I love it.
I'm sure Palpitoad's a nice guy, but how
No.
good is Palpitoad?
You will see, Mr. Automatic. You will
Alright,
see
we'll
the
see.
rest of Palpitoad. I
We will
promise.
see. Okay. Then for DRA, the final friend of Dracovish is going to be Arceus, which probably may lure speed, I would say here.
So, real quick, I want to hop on before I talk about Dino Bird here and justify the disrespect that Blacky just received in this previous round. Being such a powerful stall breaker. And basically, it's a baby Rillaboom with access to taunt to break stall breakers, and it has access to Grassy Glide just like Big Boy Rillaboom does. And with Swords Dance and Drain Punch, this thing is going to be super tough to deal with some teams. And with grassy terrain, it's going to be really nice to have a grass resist because someone sniped me a Leafeon. So here we are. Blacky, the GOAT. Anyway, Dino Bird, super beastie Pokemon. It's in that middle speed tier that I didn't have between Rabombi and my base 100s, which is the next, I think, was Zoroark. So the base 110 is going to be super nice. Defeated sucks, but the coverage on this thing is bananas with Head Smash, Rock Slide if I don't want to get too janky with it. They gave it a dual wing beat, which is super duper nice. And it can also run special, so don't sleep on the special Power Herb Meteor Beam sets. That'll be pretty fun to do in some matchups. So it does have special coverage to be able to handle Pokemon like that, and Earth Power. It's going to be super nice for some matchups for teams that aren't ready for it.
Alright, and then for Root, the final pick, Clefairy, which at this point, yeah, you didn't have a fairy, so...
Yeah, so there were just a couple of boxes that I wanted to tick with a fairy, right? So I did consider Wigglytuff, but I felt like I needed a true fighting resist here. But realistically, all that I really needed from this pick was something that could come in on knockoffs and be able to teleport out. I wanted Rocks, Teleport, and Thunder Wave, and this gave and a little bit of cleric support, and this gave me everything that I pretty much wanted in a final pick.
Alright, makes sense. Then for the final pick of Under the Radar is Almastar, which could Shell Smash, could set up hazards, but we haven't really seen Almastar perform all too much in Draft League, but maybe that's something Under the Radar can change. We will
I
have
think
to see.
he will be the one coach in this league that will make a more like this work, because he's been lately in lower tiers really liking to use Shell Smash mons, and this is one of the lower tier Shell Smashers that I think is probably the best one. Besides Barbarico, it's like pick and one choose. Do you want it to be special or physical? They are the most threatening that you get from lower tiers. So this is something that I I'm kind of scared to see what he can do with it, because he's been really fan of doing that, and it just adds another mod to his arsenal with not many points to spend that forces a lot of prep.
Lord Helix.
It's good.
And then second to last pick, a 160, which again we talked about this before. Dr. Slacking probably knew that no one could snipe him on this, so he just waited till the very last round. And they are going to pick up Skarmory. And I actually kind of dig having a more bulkier steel type secondary to Magnezone.
Yeah, and just a more sturdier ground immunity for the team in itself that necessarily isn't a levitate user that goes thus far. It's basically been that, and his grass type being a Palma Snow doesn't really have the most reliable recovery with synthesis and setting up its own hell in itself. So Skarmory is pretty nice for that. Gives him also spikes, because I know Dr. Slacking does like to play a little bit more offensively, and he likes spikes. So this probably was the best spike where he could have literally found any more that was on the table.
Yes, and then
and ditto the point from before about Registeel. It cannot be overstated how much better this mon gets with body press.
For sure. And then the final pick of the entire draft is going to be regular Porygon, the little one, the little Vils Porygon, going to Ultra Player.
I actually don't say a lot about this mon.
Yeah, but probably looking at this,
Porygons
it's just
taken.
their Ghost Switch in, right? Like they otherwise they have the Guslord, but they probably just wanted something else alongside it.
Porygon is actually really solid. I've seen it in a lot of high-profile leagues actually be really effective with just Teleport and Trick Room, which it could help Ultra Player quite a bit, but also is just a normal type. And if you don't have any like knockoff mons, it's like deceptively bulky. Like I've seen like Curse Eviolite Porygon like 6-0 like a team that is like high tier like this. Like I can see Porygon doing some things defensively for Ultra Player that's really shocking.
Alright, but that is the entire draft. All the teams are on screen. Obviously though, it doesn't really stop there for the UBL. It will for this draft stream though, because that is going to be the end of it. But before we head out, the upload day for the season is going to be Monday. So Monday will be when everything goes live, including this Monday draft recaps on the coach's channel again. I think more UBL in the Discord or in the chat here, so you can check out where all the teams are, what their links are, and you'll see their draft recaps from their perspective. And then the 8th, so actually the 15th, week after week 1, 7 days after week 2, and so on until we are at week 9, and then we advance to the playoffs. But that is going to be it for this stream. So of course, thank you everyone joining us in the chat, everyone joining me in call out of the coaches. Pretty long one, longer than I usually do them, but I definitely had fun. Hopefully you guys have did as well, and we will see you guys back with the draft recaps on our own channel. So we'll see you guys there.